One or James?
Okay, I've got it recording, so y'all take over.
Thank you, Linda. Welcome to the November 12, 2020 BAR Large Virtual Meeting. My name is James Metters. The other board members present this afternoon are Ms. Luda Subcheck, Mr. Leon Scott, and Ms. Kara Wheeler. City staff present, Mr. Lawrence Courtney and Ms. Linda Bennett. The order of the meeting will be as follows. Introduction, overview of the project by city staff to the board and for the public. The application presentation, which will be 10 minutes or as determined by the chair, and any questions of the applicant by the board or staff. Any and all presenters should clearly state your name for the record. Persons affiliated with the project, owners, developers, designers, consultants, etc., should speak during this portion rather than public comment. Public comment, 10-minute time limit or equivalent to applicant presentation or as determined by the chair. An applicant does not respond to comments made during this public comment period. Please also clearly state your name for the record. Then city staff comments and recommendations. And then the applicant will give it an opportunity to respond or clarify to both public comment and city staff comments and recommendations. And a 5-minute rule applies. The board discussion will then happen and a vote. Applicant presentation at this time will be, and public comment will be closed. The applicant may clarify inaccurate information when recognized by the chair by raising a hand and waiting to be called upon, but otherwise may only speak if a question by a board member is asked. No items have been withdrawn or deferred. However, I believe this is right, item 6 and 7 have been switched as Ms. Wheeler will be recusing herself on the last item. Please turn off all cell phones and other devices. Finally, please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns are not the purview of this board and cannot be voiced here. Mr. Courtney?
Okay.
Item 1.
Pardon me? This is the...
Well, you know, Lawrence, I'll go over this. I guess for the most part, if you're here and on this call, then you already know this. But to participate in the virtual board meeting, please refer to the following instructions, which you have if you're on it. Using the following link. If you have any questions, you can call 843-577-1686. Okay.
Okay.
Staff will control the PowerPoint presentation that includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not including board members or staff, will only be given the capability to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. Chat and the Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. Public comment, the applicants, all team members, and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you have registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item they have commented on. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. Board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay, in favor, or nay, not in favor. The chairman will reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chairman if he has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, he will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. Staff will issue meeting results, including staff comments and board motion to the applicant following the meeting. Results will also be posted on the city website. These proceedings are being recorded.
And thank you very much, Mr. Meadows. Agenda item 1 is 363 King Street. They are requesting approval of demolition of 2 rear structures behind existing historic facades. This is a Category 3 building on King. It is in no discerning neighborhood. It is circa 1981. It's in the 3-6 Height District in the Old and Historic District. Some context photos are, this is the subject site, King Street here, St. Philip here. Site goes from King to about mid-block. It's this building right here, very familiar. And with that, we will turn things over to Mr. Ramos for his presentation.
Great. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. My name is Steve Ramos. I'm an architect with LS3P, and I'm here on behalf of the owner of the property, my client, Mr. Sam Beznos of BezTech. There's actually this project or this presentation and then 2 more, and that there are 3 contiguous properties, 363 King, 367, and 369. They're all under the same ownership. And so I'll probably talk a little bit about each one in this presentation just because they're adjacent, which should make the other ones go pretty quickly. As Lawrence pointed out, the facade that you see there, the red terracotta brick facade, that was built in 1891. It was a hardware store at that time. And that structure was 2 stories, and it went the entire length of the site all the way back. And it was a really, well, it is still a very handsome facade. In 1981, so 90 years after the original building was constructed, probably what I would call an unfortunate 3-story student housing complex was built behind this facade. So in 1981, a majority of that historic building was demolished, and only the facade, a portion of the roof, and some of the side masonry walls remain. And we are proposing to keep those historic elements, but we would like to remove the 1981 construction. It has basically become obsolete, and it's ready to be replaced. You can see on this aerial photograph, there's a red dashed line. That dashed line really kind of differentiates between old and new. The old is in the front along King Street, and the new is in the back. And so it's the newer structures that we are proposing to remove. Next slide, please. this is just a different angle. The building we're talking about now is 363, and it's on the right side. And if you see in the top corner where his cursor is, that's the extent of the historic roof. And so we're going to keep that. And then everything beyond that historic roof, we'd like to remove. Next slide, please. And so this is a zoomed in version of the Google Earth image again. And so with red dashed lines, we are indicating the division between historic and non-historic. And again, effectively, we would like to keep the historic and remove the non-historic. If you could, yeah, next slide, please. Because there are so many parts and pieces to this complex, we lettered all of the buildings to kind of keep track of them. And we created a building key that's on the right side of your page, where we've identified whether or not we are proposing demolition or whether or not we are proposing to keep it. And we also were able to date the buildings. So that little chart tells you approximately the age of each structure. And so again, for 363 King Street, the structures we are proposing demolition would be G, which is a 3-story student housing complex that was built in 1981, J, which is a 2-story complex also built in 1981, and then building I, which is a standalone structure. That is also part of 363 King, also built in 1981, which we would like to demolish. Next slide. This is the same image, but we've overlaid the current survey just for reference. Next slide. And then just to make it clear for you all to see, the buildings highlighted in white, those are the historic buildings that we are prepared to not just keep, but to rehabilitate. Next slide. And so for those that were out on site on Tuesday, I think you were probably surprised by the construct of this building. So you can see that red star that I put on the facade. If you step into the building, that's the same window. And you can see that in 1981, they basically kept this old facade and they built this kind of hodgepodge of buildings that are just within that historic facade. Probably at the time, they were really great student housing buildings, but over the years, they have become obsolete. On the image on the right, you can see where there's a historic masonry wall. That's along the north property line. We are proposing to keep that wall, as well as the roof that you see up at the top of that image. Next slide. This is a drawing on the right. We've shown a section cut through the building. And so I mentioned that historically it was a 2-story building. And then in 1981, they kind of slipped in a 3-story building. And so, you know, everything that we've highlighted in red in that section drawing, those are the historic elements that we are prepared to keep. Next slide. These are some images, kind of just working your way back into the site. The center image is the standalone building, again, built in 1981. Next slide. These images are 367 King, so I will talk about those in the next presentation. The image on the far right, that is the very back corner of 363 King. Again, the 1981 structure, you can see it's exposed CMU block. So the construction is nothing that I would consider noteworthy or worth preserving. Next slide. We can skip, we'll talk about this when we talk about 369 King. Next slide. This is also 369 King, which we can talk about. this is a series of Sanborn maps, and we were able to date the building with these. We also have a newspaper article from 1981, and that's how we know that's when this housing complex was built. And so you can see in the 1884 Sanborn map, the building that's there now did not exist. But if you go to the next Sanborn map, you'll see in 1902, that is when the historic building was constructed. Again, it was a 2-story building and went the full length of the site. And you can skip ahead. Yeah, you can see it there. And it was still there in 1951. And it was also, that building was still there in 1973. I'm sorry, 1955. And then the next map is 1973. Again, it was still, I'm sorry, 1967. We were very thorough in the Sanborn maps. So the next one is 1973. There you go. So again, that building still existed in 1973. The previous historic building, that is. Next slide. And so this was, actually, a lot of this input was provided by Historic Charleston years ago. They have a easement on this building, so they had a lot of information. But you can see that newspaper article from 1981. That's when they kind of gutted the building and tore off the back and built this newer student housing structure. And again, it was probably a fine building at the time. I think it's really unfortunate the way they demolished most of this building. But we are proposing to remove those non-historic pieces. They are not visible from the public right-of-way by any means. The quality of the construction is really not great. And so, you know, they don't really contribute to the historic fabric of Charleston. And so for those reasons, we kindly ask for your approval of the demolition of the non-historic buildings at 363 King Street.
Thank you, Mr. Ramos.
Sure.
Public comment?
We have Justin from Historic Charleston.
You all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, Justin.
This is Justin Schwebler from the Historic Charleston Foundation. The foundation has an easement, as Stephen had mentioned, on the front facade of 363 King Street. We've already reviewed the proposed demolition plans of the non-historic portions of the building with the applicant and have granted approval based on the terms of that easement. HCF has no objection to this request. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Any other public comment?
None.
Staff comments, recommendations?
Any applicant clarification?
No, just one thing I should say is that
Steve, hold on, just a minute.
Yep.
This is staff comments and recommendations.
Okay, staff comments include that these buildings are non-historic and are not visible from a public right-of-way, and staff encourages the salvage and reuse or recycling of any materials possible. And with that, our recommendation is for approval of demolitions.
Okay, great. So Stephen, is there something you want to follow up with about any of the public comment or staff comments?
yeah, just the comment about reusing and recycling, we're all about that, and I just wanted to clarify that the plan is to rehabilitate the historic structures, and so step one is getting getting the junk out of the way. But that we're not proposing to leave a facade on King Street. It's part of a big plan. So this is a win-win all around.
Thanks, Stephen. Board discussion, vote.
This is Leon Scott. I just want to say, Steve, I really appreciate your commitment to retaining and preserving, and you say rehabilitate that building. It's a beautiful place, and the old work on it is absolutely stunning. So really, that's very impressive. You guys are doing everything you can to, as you say, rehabilitate that. So those are my comments. I'm very comfortable with what the staff has recommended.
This is Carol Wheeler. I agree with the staff's recommendation as well. The existing buildings for this application are non-historic and not in a good shape. And the actual historic portion that's supposed to be saved is currently exposed to the elements, and hopefully any development of the site will better protect the historic structures than what is the case right now. So I would also support the demolition. The only question I have for staff is that when the demolition happens, that any bracing or support for the existing historic structures, any drawings will be, I assume, will be submitted to city staff, or city staff requests that usually. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay.
Ms. Subject, do you have any comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion for approval of the demolition with staff comments. This is Carol Wheeler.
Carol has made a motion for approval with staff comments. Is there a second?
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Leon has seconded that motion. I'm going to poll each member for your vote. Ms. Subject, how do you vote? Okay. Let's stand by here just a minute. I think Luda is having some technical difficulties.
Thank you. So I'm in support of the staff recommendation for the demolition, as well as the board members.
So Luda, a motion has already been made and seconded, okay. And this is, I'm polling you for your vote. How do you vote?
Yay for in favor.
Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
Ms. Wheeler, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
This is James Metters. I also vote yay in favor, so it is approved unanimously.
All right, and item 2 on the agenda is the building adjacent on the north at 367 King Street. They are requesting approval of demolition of rear addition. It is a category 4 structure in no particular neighborhood, circa 1981, in the 3-6 Height District in the Old and Historic District. Some site context photos. Actually, I think we've only got one, which is the same one that we saw earlier, with King Street on the east, St. Philip on the west, and the site goes to about mid-block. It's this building right here in the middle. And with that, we will let Mr. Ramos continue his presentation.
Thanks, Lawrence. This is similar to the previous presentation where there is a historic building. In this case, the building appears on the 1884 Sanborn map. Those are the oldest Sanborn maps we have. So this is a very historic structure. But there is a 1981 addition that was kind of built onto the back. And so we are proposing to kind of take off that 1981 addition and keep everything that is historic. There you can see it there. Probably one of the best drawings. If you go ahead to the next one after this. Yeah, so you can see there's a hipped roof, which is historic. Not that one. So move your cursor down. Yeah, that's it there. Yep. So yeah, that's 367. And then there's a flat roof. That's the 1981 piece. So basically, we want to keep the hipped roof portion, which is a masonry structure, and take off the back. It's probably about 12 feet, that flattened roof area, which again is not historic. Yep, there you can see it there. Next slide. We can probably advance to the ground level photographs. Yeah, next, right here. Okay, perfect. So this is a little, actually, if you could go back. Perfect. Now move ahead one more, sorry. Perfect. Okay. The image on the right. So the image on the right, that is the back addition that we would like to remove. And if you see where there's a red dashed line on the right, that's where the old and new junction occurs. And so again, that's the piece we would like to pull off. That the old masonry wall is still there because we can tell it's inside the apartment. So we basically want to pull off that addition, which will expose the old historic wall. It will likely need some rehab once we expose it, but we will be removing the newer addition and then rehabilitating that old building. So that's really the extent of this one. We can, if you want to go through the Sanborn maps, we can see the history of it. So back in 1884, where you see the letter C, you can see that the hipped roof that's on today's Google Earth image aligns with the outline that you see there in 1884. So we can see that historic building was there. But you can see that there was an addition that used to be there that no longer exists. Next slide. So again, by overlaying these images, we can see that, for example, there was a 2-story addition that you see where his cursor is. And unfortunately, that 2-story addition is no longer there. Same thing, 1951, where you see dry cleaning, that building no longer there. Next slide, please. Again, 1967, there were a series of outbuildings that are no longer present, but the building where letter C is, that was present. 1973 again. So the 1973 Sanborn map is always a telling map, because if the building doesn't show up on that map, then it's less than 50 years old. And it exists today, then we know it's less than 50 years old. So That addition does not show up on this map. Next. Next. And so for the same reasons, this addition is not, it's not visible at all from the public right of way. In this case, it's not historic. It was built in 1981. And I would say it's of mid quality. It's a little bit obsolete, and we think the property would be better without it, and we'll be able to restore and rehabilitate the historic building. And for those reasons, we kindly ask for your permission for demolition.
Thanks, Stephen. Is there any public contact? Linda?
Justin from Historic Charleston.
My only comment was regarding 363, so you can proceed through the next two. Thank you.
Okay.
So, are there any, is there any other public comment?
No, sir.
Okay. Lawrence?
Okay. Staff comments are very much like the previous one. The building is non-historic and is not visible from a public right of way, and staff encourages the salvage and reuse or recycling of any materials possible. And with that, we give a recommendation of approval of demolition.
Thank you, Lawrence. Stephen, do you have any comment?
No comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Board discussion?
This is Leon Scott. I'd just like to make a motion for approval of demolition.
Leon has made a motion for approval of demolition. Is there a second?
Luda Subchuk, I will second that.
Ms. Subject seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to poll the board members. Ms. Subject, how do you vote?
Yes, for approval.
Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
Ms. Wheeler, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
And this is James Metters. I vote yay in favor, so the motion carries.
And item 4 on the agenda is
You skipped, there's number 3.
Number 369. Yeah, there we go.
I'm sorry.
You're trying to get rid of me.
Well, you know, it just seems like no. This actually is the important one. So, item 3 is 369 King, request of approval of demolition of rear addition. It is a Category 4 structure in no particular neighborhood, circa 1955 to 1967, post 1973. It's in a 3-6 height district in the old and historic district. It is the third building in the grouping here. It's this building. And with that, we'll give it back to Mr. Ramos.
Okay, this is the last one, I promise. This is 369 King. It's the next building in line, and this one is a little more complicated because one of the pieces that we are proposing to remove is older than 50 years, and so by the definition, it is considered historic. So because of that, you know, it's worth giving a greater review. But, you know, I think you will find that although it is older than 50 years, it's circa 1955. It's really of no great value. And so I will highlight that as we go through the drawings. You can go to the next. So 369 King, the oldest piece is that red hipped roof that you see there. That's terracotta tile. That one also shows up on the 1884 Sanborn map. So we know that it's a very historic building. And then when you go to the left of that dashed line, there are a series of additions that occurred post 1884, where Lawrence's cursor is now, is that white roof that you see. That is a one-story cinder block building. It was a warehouse addition that shows up on the 1955 Sanborn map. So that is the piece that, again, by the definition of 50 years, is historic. And then there is a gray roof that's like a square to the right. If you move your cursor to the right, basically yeah, right there. So that is an addition that is 3 stories, and that doesn't appear on the 1973 Sanborn map. So therefore, we know that it is less than 50 years old because of that. And it is of pretty low quality. And so there will be no loss for that building to be removed. So similar to the previous 2, we're keeping the historic piece. We'd like to remove the subsequent additions to the building, half of which are not historic. There is a piece that is historic, which we'll look at in the next photos. Next. Here is the Google Earth overlay. So that one-story building is the white roof. It goes almost to the back of the site. There's a big tree, so you can't really see the back. But if you go to the next image where there's a survey, there you can see the back footprint of the building there. So the building that is labeled as A, that is the 1884 structure that will remain. The building that is labeled as E is post 1973. We'd like to remove that. And the building that was labeled as H is circa 1955. We'd also like to remove that building as well. Next. And there's, again, the diagram that showed the white buildings are to remain. Yeah, thank you. Okay, next slide. Next. Next. One more. Okay, so this is a good slide. The center image on the left side where you see the yellow stucco, and then you see a red dashed line. On the right side of the red dashed line, that is painted brick. It's painted yellow. That's the 1884 structure. And then the yellow stucco, that is a 3-story structure, again, that was built after 1973. And you can see an image on the far left. It's not the highest quality wooden construction. You know, it would probably need to be replaced just for safety reasons in the near future anyway. But it's certainly not something worth preserving. And then in the middle image where you see the white stucco, that's the one-story cinder block building built in circa 1955. Next image. Next. Okay, so all three of these images show that one-story building. So you can see it there. It's again, it's just cinder block with stucco. It has a TPO membrane roof, so it's a modern roof. The framing of the roof is actually metal studs. So at some point the roof was replaced. We know that. This building directly abuts to what was formerly known as the Garden Theater and is now the Urban Outfitters building. So that's the tall brick wall that you see adjacent. So that's not part of our property. But this building directly abuts it. And so we're proposing to remove the one-story building. I think you will agree it's, again, although it's older than 50 years, it's not something that I would say contributes to Charleston's historic fabric. And again, it is not at all visible from the public right-of-way. And so for those reasons, we kindly ask for your approval for demolition. Oh, I forgot to mention, there was an image that you just saw, that's inside the one-story building. Sometimes we find some really nice wooden roof rafters that are worth preserving. But in this case, at some point, they replaced that roof and it's just metal studs on cinder block walls. So nothing that I would say is worth preserving.
Thanks, Stephen. Is there any public comment, Linda?
I don't believe so.
Lawrence?
Although the building is historic and we have dated it somehow around 1961, although that might be debatable. It is a simple utilitarian structure of concrete block with no character defining features and is not visible from a public right-of-way. Once more, staff encourages the salvage and reuse or recycling of any materials possible, and our recommendation is for approval of demolition.
Stephen, do you got any follow-up?
I do not.
Board discussion?
I think this is Carol Wheeler. I think Steve summarized well that the structure is not contributing, and none of the there's no craftsmanship or sign of craftsmanship that should be salvaged. So I'll make a motion for approval of demolition.
So Carol has made a motion for approval of demolition. Is there a second?
This is Leo Scott.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, Luda Sobchuk, I will second that.
Luda has seconded Carol's motion. Is there any further discussion? Stephen, I'd like to tell you, you did a nice job with your research and presentation. Thank you.
Appreciate that.
So I'm going to poll the board members. Ms. Sobchak, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Ms. Wheeler, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
This is James Metters. I vote yay in favor, so this motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now on to item 4. Sorry for jumping the gun a little bit there earlier. This is 270 King, which is also addressed. Actually, the address of this project will be 771 Wentworth Street. They are requesting approval of a mock-up of the new window in an existing opening. Also, we are looking at the mock-up of the enclosure for the HVAC on the roof. It is a Category 2 structure in no particular neighborhoods, circa 1871, 72, in the 3-story height district in the old and historic district. This is an aerial context view with Wentworth on the north and King Street on the west. The front elevation, the elevation from right in the middle of Wentworth and King, looking south. The facade is right here on your left, looking north. And with that, we will turn it over to Mr. Herdorfer for his presentation.
Good evening. So this has been in front of the board before for approval, obviously, and this is, as Lawrence mentioned, the mock-up for the window and the HVAC screen. Next slide, Lawrence. So just existing context and historic photograph. Next slide. Some aerial pictures, again, of the existing structure. King Street runs, left to right on the page. Next slide. Looking at the south side of the building, you can also see the existing HVAC platform. Exactly. Next slide. Again, kind of looking from at the southeast. Next slide. The north facade from above. Next slide. And then both ground level and rear from the parking deck, actually looking at the south facade on the lower right-hand corner. Again, that existing HVAC screen is on the top of that existing building. Next slide. So one of the best historic photographs that we've come across in our research, showing the windows, the original historic windows. Next slide. Another one just for reference. Next slide. And then this one from the Historic Charleston Foundation archives that shows, I mean, they're all black and white, but it also shows just a different contrast in the window frames and the window and the facade, which is interesting, which, we could have many conversations about the conjecture of what all these materials are. Next slide. Close up of the historic windows and window frames. Next slide. Existing and proposed elevations. This is the King Street elevation, which the board has seen previously and approved. Next slide. North elevation, existing and proposed. And next slide. East elevation. Next slide. And the south elevation, existing and proposed. And you'll notice on the top of the building, there's the existing HVAC screen and the proposed HVAC screen. And we're not looking to increase the location of the screen any further closer to King Street. Obviously, we need to put equipment up there and make it slightly larger, which we're growing to the east. Exactly, that side. Next slide. Wall section through the second floor window. Next slide. And then wall section, proposed wall section of the window and GFRC surround through the third floor roof. Next slide. Window details showing just the size and scale of the second floor windows on the left and the third floor windows on the right. Next slide. And then the kind of details of how this is being attached to the existing masonry wall with both the interior trim, the framing of the structural members sandwiched between the windows, which are kind of in, and then the GFRC, which sits outboard of that, which is where exactly the mouse is currently. Next slide. And then just the drawing showing the detail and the kind of the profiles for all the molded GFRC pieces that were made for this mock-up. Next slide. So here we have the mock-up in place on the second floor window. And we might come back to these. I just want to walk you through what is there. So obviously this is took a lot of effort to get all of these pieces and parts coordinated. But this is from street level, both on directly across the street and then across King Street, looking at this window. Next slide. Again, from street level, looking a little bit closer at the GFRC surround, which is dark gray in the picture, and then the window behind, which is kind of a dark bluish gray, similar in color. Next slide. And again, from street level, looking straight up, and then slightly different angle. Next slide. So this is up a little bit closer on a lift floating in air at some of the details and connections that were put in place. I do want to note that the sill height of the windows and the cast sill that you see was dictated by the existing masonry on the inside. And where that existing masonry stopped, it was built up, so we lowered it back down to where we believe the existing sill was, and then that dictated the size of the openings and where the sill came out and then dropped down. The way this is constructed is actually in pieces. The GFRC is segmented because it's not light, as you can imagine. So the breakpoints are at very specific places so that they are hidden and concealed when they are all put together and connected. Next slide. And then here we have the historic photograph on the left and the proposed window and GFRC surround on the right, showing the size and scale. And again, this was an attempt with many conversations with both historic preservation groups and city staff and consultants over many years to try and get this as close to accurate as possible with current methods and methodologies. I believe that's it.
So Kevin, you believe that the sill height is approximately, I mean, within an inch or so of where it was?
It is, and there's actually different sill conditions on the King Street facade versus the Wentworth Street facade. Because of the openings are bigger for the storefronts versus the side. So this detail, the sill condition will look the same as you go around. The distance from where the sill is down to the plinth below it will be slightly different. But yes, we believe that's exactly where the sill was historically.
Any other questions from staff, board?
No.
Is it, I'm sorry. Is there, thank you very much. Is there a public comment?
Yes, sir. There's Aaron Minigan and then Justin from Historic Charleston, if they will unmute themselves.
Would you like me to go first, Linda?
That would be great. Thanks.
Okay. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for continuing to engage us on this project and pleased to see it entering the final phase of review. We have been consistently supportive of this highly positive restoration of 270 King Street and feel the window mock-ups represent a pretty faithful reproduction of the original windows. So we ask that the board grant final approval of this request. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
This is Justin Schwebler from Historic Charleston Foundation. We would like to thank the applicants for the tour of the building a few weeks ago to see the apartment mock-up installation. And we think the applicant should be commended for sourcing a new and durable material for replicating the historic windows as closely as possible. We do, however, have some concerns with the level of finish on the GFRC. At this time, there seems to be some discoloration or patches on the mullions. We believe a more uniform color and application of the GFRC should be ensured to give the windows a long-lasting and finished look upon installation. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin. Any other public comment?
No, sir, not at this time.
Lawrence?
Okay, it is unclear as to what the color the new GFRC window frames will or should be. Historic photographs appear to show both light and dark variations. Windows need to be obviously inset in to the walls to match the original depths as closely as can be ascertained from historic photos. The jam detail on D1 A616 shows no sealant in between the stucco and window frame, and we wonder if this is realistic. If used, the color of the sealant should around the windows should match the adjacent stucco color. To achieve an accurate representation of the window in the opening, the stucco really needs to be completed to wrap in at the jambs and window perimeter. It is unclear from the details as to how this extra thickness will affect the edges of the windows. As a discussion with applicant indicated that the intent is for the stucco to be returned to the edge of the GFRC frame, covering up the sealant. It appears also that the HVAC units will be visible from King Street and will need to have screening reviewed by the board or staff. Staff has no issues with the use of GFRC and the representation of the window itself. It simply needs to be shown in a completely finished opening. And with that, our recommendation is deferral of the window mock-up with staff and board comments.
Thank you, Lawrence. Kevin, would you like to respond to either the staff comments or public comments?
Yeah, just briefly. Do you mind going back to the images with the details? Yeah, the next one. No, go down. Sorry, other direction. There you go, right there. Well, firstly, Justin, we agree with HCF's comment about the discoloration. There was a significant time lapse between when the GFRC was cast and then when it was installed. And there was some, part of this process is filling in some of the joints where they connect. And so the coloration will be continuous and that will be seamless. Obviously, that's part of this process, but we definitely want to make sure we get that right. In terms of the detailing with the stucco, the restuccoing the facade was never part of the charge or the ask from the board or staff in terms of the window and GFRC mock-up for this project. Part of how this is designed is the actual waterproof membrane is on the essentially between the GFRC frame and the window. There's padding and structural components in line with the window frame, and that's where the waterproof membrane is. The GFRC sits outboard of that, so there will be no flashing or no continuous metal edge strips or anything like that applied either in the stucco or outboard of the GFRC as part of the application process. The only thing that's not represented in reality on this mock-up right now is the stucco that would cover the existing masonry and return back into the GFRC. The main reason that hasn't been done is because there's lots of things that need to happen before that, both with repointing the brick, making sure we get it structurally sound before we can come back in and stucco over that existing opening. Again, that was never part of what our expectation was for what we needed to do. What you see here is essentially a GFRC frame that's got a caulk joint behind it to connect it or have it fill in the gap between the existing masonry and the GFRC. When the stucco gets reapplied, the intent is to have that line up just like it's drawn in the drawings to the edge of the GFRC, concealing that caulk joint and making it as clean and crisp as possible. So go ahead.
Kevin, let me ask you a question. I'm looking at the brick where it moves towards the elements of the new window system, and the bricks have been cut. Were those cuts the original cuts to the brick, or have those been done to, as you place these different elements in place?
Where you see the yellow on the pictures?
No, I'm just looking at where, let's say the left hand, the upper left hand, where it goes up. The brick is, was that modified during the original window installation, or has that been modified for this to be installed?
My understanding is that was modified for when they took the original or the infill out and put a plywood panel in this opening alone, and then filled it and then caulked it in and tried to make it somewhat watertight, and so they cut that brick. We've gone in and taken some of the mortar out just so we can get a good anchor embedment where we cleared out the stucco as well.
So let me ask this a different way. Let's go to the upper right picture. And it appears that the brick has been modified to fit the profile of that element. Is that right or not?
No, that's not right. None of the brick has been cut back. The stucco has been taken off, and then so you see the different width of that black caulk joint between the GFRC and the brick, and that width varies because the masonry is not straight.
I got you. So that brick continues on right behind that black caulk.
Yeah, it goes straight back.
I got you. Okay. I thought that was actually a void. I couldn't see that. Okay.
No, so the GFRC pieces have embed bolts in place, and so we have to drill into the masonry, epoxy that bolt in, and attach it in place until it holds, and then we caulk that joint.
Okay. I have another question. If you go to the first floor on the north elevation and you go over to the door that goes in on the first floor, at least when I looked at it, it appears that that is from the original construction. Have you looked at that to determine what the material is that is used to construct that surround around that door?
I'm not exactly.
So if you're
sure
looking
what
at this
you're
picture
referring
right now, look at
Yeah.
the far left, it would be the northwest corner, a northeast corner, excuse me. That northeast corner right down there is where the doorway is. Lawrence, go all the way down with your right, just to the right there. There's a door that goes in to the building, and it has the same columns that are intact that you find on the second and the third floor. And I would anticipate that that was the same material. And I was just wondering if you, looked at that.
We did not look at that. My understanding, that little element there has been enveloped by the addition of in the back. So this picture of the building's grown by 3 bays from what this picture shows. So that's a little single-story entryway that got taken down and removed. But no, we haven't looked at that in depth just because it's so hard to tell.
I was there today and looked at the door that I'm talking about. So I may be not describing it well, but it's an existing element. And, just trying to think of what the materials may be, what the original materials may have been to build that system.
For the window, the tracery around the windows?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, so this is where, in our extensive research, there's no definitive answer, and we've looked at it from everything from painted wood to cast iron to limestone. And honestly, I was talking with city staff, Lawrence, the other day, and limestone is kind of my default these days just because of how it's carved and the size and scale and how long it lasted, and the fact that it's a Masonic hall.
Thank you. Any other questions from board members? Is there discussion among the board?
Carol Wheeler here, just one question. What's the thickness of the stucco you're applying? Is it a 1-inch stucco coat that you will apply to?
Yeah, we're going to match existing stucco, and then if we have to, add some in order to get a smooth, even plane to where we want it, it might be even thicker than that.
Okay, thank you.
So this is Luda. So Kevin, so this application is only about the window construction and not installation? Is that what you're trying to achieve?
Lawrence, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is a mock-up for the window and the window surround tracery that it's in GFRC. That's what this submission is for.
Okay, so including GFRC as a surrounding the window, but not installation into the opening because of it's not finished. We were just trying to determine what are you after, and if there's another step for us to look at it when you finally install that assembly, and how stucco will work out there, how sill will be finished, and things like that. That's kind of question for me.
Yeah, so the only thing that hasn't been completed to make this opening finished, building wide is the stucco, and there's minor stucco repair throughout the entire facade of the building. But this window opening is complete, and then now we need to go back and hopefully it gets approved with the stucco and cover the brick with stucco and return it back to the GFRC.
Are there other board comments or discussion?
This is Carol Wheeler. I have a few comments just in regards to the staff comments. I think regarding the color, staff comment A, since historic pictures show that both in dark and light, I don't think we can request one or the other necessarily. And I do like the dark window frames as proposed right now. And the dark windows itself, I think it creates a nice contrast. So I'm fine with that. Regarding, I'm also fine with the material itself. It is on the second floor, you can't touch it. And it helps you recreate those elaborate shapes. So I think this has been done in a nice way. Regarding the cork, I think that cork color that's currently black should match exactly that brownish color or the grayish color, even though Kevin said that it would be that the stucco would cover the cork, but in some areas it might not. So if possible, I think those colors should exactly match in case the stucco can't cover it up. And I would be fine with approving the GFRC and the windows, but I do think that at least on a staff level, staff or maybe the BAR, depending what the board thinks, at least staff should look at how the stucco meets the window and how the colors go together. Last comment regarding the depth of the window. When you look at the historic photographs and you look at what is being proposed, if you imagine there's another inch of stucco that will be added, I do think that the depth is accurately shown, and I don't think it needs to be set in deeper. That's all I have. Thank
you, Carol.
This is Leon Scott. Just a very brief comment. First of all, I think they look good. I think they've done an excellent job at capturing the original look. And again, as I've heard, it's on the second floor, so you're unable to touch it. But certainly, if you were to look at the some of the early photos, I think they've done a really good job in capturing that original look. Again, that was my comment.
Thanks, Leon. I think that it's very important if the board is charged with looking at mock-ups to have a completed mock-up to look at. And I agree with many of the comments.
Okay, this is
excuse me just a minute. Sorry. But I am not comfortable approving this without a completed mock-up. If the mock-up cannot be completed in place, then Kevin, I'm unaware of any, if there were some arrangements made with city staff, I'm unaware of them, and there may have been. But seeing how that transition is going to work from the stucco, or is going to integrate into, because I understood what you were saying, as it returns from the face of the building and then wraps into under or around the window unit. As I've studied the pictures of this building for a long time, part of that detail for how that stucco transitions into it and those moldings continuing to wrap around and then be covered with the stucco, I mean, it's really beautiful. And I would have a difficult time voting for approval of the mock-up without it being completed. When it's completed, I'm sure I will vote for supporting it. The second thing is, Lawrence, I'm not really sure about the process for this, but at least on my agenda, the HVAC screening or what we looked at is not on our agenda. Should it have been, or can we? I guess the board can say, hey, we're gonna just include that, but I need some guidance on that.
Right. I think that we just need seeing that, that it is indeed visible. I think we need some details of what it will be.
So that's not going to be part of what we're, well, it's just not on the agenda, I guess is
Right.
what I'm looking at. So those are my comments. Luda, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, I'm sorry. I thought you finished. So I'm pretty much in agreement with everybody who's discussed this kind of back and forth of the material of the this window assembly as a GFRC, which is fine. But again, it's really hard to give the approval right now, not seeing how this whole thing will be finished, because it seems like stucco will overlap the GFRC in when it's botting, so we will be losing the dimension of and proportion of that element. So until we see it, to me, I think we cannot approve this application. I cannot vote for approval of this application.
Are there any other board discussions?
This is Carol Wheeler again. I think if there is a motion out there to defer the mock-up, I think it should at least maybe include that the material itself is, or that there should be some level of, that the applicant can be comfortable moving forward with the GFRC without necessarily approving it. And after the discussion that I heard now, I agree that if you actually add an inch of stucco on the jamb side, this might cover much more of the actual window frame that we would want maybe. So I guess I'll agree that we need to see the full mock-up before we can approve.
So Carol, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'll make let me see. I'll make a motion for, let's see. I'll make a motion for the deferral of the mock-up with staff comments to include, deferral of the mock-up with staff and board comments to include information on the rooftop screening and with the general support of GFRC as the window frame material.
This is Luda Sobchuk. I second that.
Hold on just a minute, Luda. I'm writing this out, Carol. So, Carol, just let me make sure I'm getting this right. Deferral of the mock-up with staff and board comments to include rooftop screening and general support of the GRC for the window surround material.
Yes, I think it also needs to include that a section of that the stucco needs to be applied, and I'm just looking through the staff comments here that don't specifically require that, I think. So I think that might actually have to be added to the motion, sorry.
Well, it's okay, and requiring stucco at intersection with the window unit.
Yes, thank you.
Is HVAC enclosure was mentioned? I don't remember.
Yes, it was included that information should be provided for the rooftop screening.
The deferral of the mock-up to include staff comments and board comments to include rooftop screening and general support of GRC material, and requiring stucco at intersection with the window unit to be installed.
Would be the GFRC, right?
The GFRC, right.
That's correct.
Okay, so Kara has
And
that.
which enclosure
Has
did
that-
we,
I'm sorry, Luda, go ahead.
did you mention HVAC enclosure or I keep missing
Yes,
it?
yes, we did.
Okay,
Right, so we have a motion on the floor by Kara. Is there a second?
I will second. Luda Subchuk.
Luda Subject has seconded Kara's motion. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Subject, how do you vote?
Yay in favor of deferral.
Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
Ms. Wheeler, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
And this is James Metters. I vote yay in favor of the deferral. Thank you.
Okay, the next the item is 480 East Bay Street. The board has seen this twice already, and applicant is requesting final approval for the renovation of the east portion and a new plaza along the north portion. This is these buildings are not rated. They're in no defined neighborhood, circa 1944 through 1951 and post 1955. They are in a 30V 56 height district in the old and historic district. Some context photos. This aerial shows parcel in between Washington on the east and East Bay on the west. Looking east from East Bay Street, the portion of the building that will be renovated, and previous motion was for preliminary approval with staff comments A and B. Board comments were, one member said likes the new tower. One said important to see landscape design. Not sure we should give preliminary approval without seeing the landscape design. Another board member said in agreement, need to see landscape design. Actually, let me clarify that. I think what they mean is site design plan, because landscape is not in the purview of the board. Another board member said that the tower has been too simplified, that the previous tower had more interest. Previous staff comments were it is noted that staff comments were not included in the board motion for approval at conceptual review. The project is essentially the same as before while being further developed. The tower feature has has become a more formalized obelisk shape, which appears to staff to be in contrast with the more whimsical nature of the plaza features, and staff recommends the initial asymmetrical form of the original tower design. And with that, at that point, staff's recommendation was for final approval with staff and board comments with final review by staff. And with that, let's turn the presentation over to Mr. Schmidt.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you, Joe.
Perfect. First off, I'd like to say I am very pleased to see that 270 King is being done by somebody. We've been in business for 36 years, and in that time, we've had 3 separate clients who took a serious look at it and for various reasons just walked away, and the building's been suffering ever since. So that's fantastic that they're there. They seem to be doing a good job, and I hope you continue to work with them. As for this project, if you would like, I would jump to frame 19, where it shows the different, the perspectives in the previous and the current. Frame 19. So the issues before had to do with, you can stay there, correct. The issue had to do with the landscape plan defined, which it's still a work in progress that we hope to work with the staff on. Part of the reason for that is they're looking to determine what the mix of the clientele are going to be for the project. There's still various openings in here, and that will actually help dictate how we deal with the landscape, whether they need more seating areas, more bench areas, depending on what their uses are. But the fundamentals are there as far as they're taking down the old crepe myrtles. They're coming in with 14 to 16 foot palm trees and some low ground covers. If you could go to the next slide for the architectural. You can see the difference between the previous tower and the current tower. You'll need to go back. There you go. That's fine. You can see the contrast difference between the previous and the current tower. We've adjusted it more like it was originally, more asymmetrical, more whimsical, I think is the term that we were searching for. You also can see the canopy colors that we've gone from, it was just a yellow green, it was just a placeholder. The building is a tan color now with sort of burnt orange pilasters. We're not talking about changing those colors, but the canopy sail colors are now a nice warm brown that blends in very well with that. If you'd like to jump to the next one. Really no changes on the back, nothing, it's just developed our details in the detail package. The next, please. Same thing here, virtually no change. You can see the sails from Washington Street and how they'll come off differently. Again, that was just a placeholder. We don't need 2 colors. There you go, it's even better there. So, and you can get a better view of the tower. Since the tower was really the only other architectural discussion, if you want to jump to slide 44. I'm sorry, 45. 45. There you go. So we took a look at the tower across the street that's still remaining and added some of those elements and changed out the pyramid top on it and then added the pipes back and feel like it fits exactly what everybody was discussing at the last meeting. Really, I think to help save you time and those were the points that were being discussed. There wasn't much out there except more details. So I'll step back and entertain whatever questions you might have on minor details.
Joe, and Lawrence, you may have to help me with this, but one of the things that we were looking for was the landscape. And I get what you're saying, and I mean I understand it also. But I think that is a question. And Lawrence, help me when we were going through the notes from the last meeting. One of the things that we wanted to see was the landscape plan.
Right. There was a question by Ms. Subchuk regarding landscaping along East Bay and also landscaping in the parking. And I really have to at this point remind the board that it really has no purview over landscaping. It does have purview over hardscape, including fences and walls.
And thank you for that, Lawrence. And Joe, are all fences and walls shown on here?
Yes, all that's there. And if I can add one more thing to that, typically on a site like this, you would expect to see more landscape islands between the parking. We're not affecting the rest of the parking, and that was a predeterminate idea for this project. Stay right there if you don't mind. Because of the plaza that you just saw go by, we are taking 11 parking spaces out of downtown Charleston, and we are at our absolute minimum. So we don't have the ability to interject any more landscaping within the surface parking itself. And that's sort of our starting point on this. We also made the point, this was in conceptual, and we set the tone for this project, was that this is not intended to be a 50-year project. This is probably a 10-year project. And again, not wanting to, but now not being able to do some kind of grand, this is like a suburban parking lot, if you will, and for retail. And we aren't able to bring it up to some kind of very heavily landscaped position without losing these parking spaces. So we're virtually not touching the rest of that parking lot. We are dealing with the wall out on the front, and all those details are in place. And we're dealing with all the walls on Washington Street, and all those details are in place.
Thank you, Joe. Are there any questions by either board member or Lawrence for Joe? Is there any public comment?
No public comment.
Lawrence?
Okay, let me scroll through this real quick, as quickly as I can. Okay. Our comments include that a full site plan, including landscaping, is shown on sheet L100, which I'll not waste everybody's time trying to get back to, but it does show palmettos along East Bay as well as other landscaping. It looks good actually. The and staff notes again that landscaping is not within the purview of the board. Brick samples have been provided to staff, and I can show you I can show you those via video. I'm not quite sure how successful that will be. I think that we have not quite figured out how to present the board with samples. I think going forward, we would like applicant to furnish photos of those with their preliminary submittal. I do have the samples here and can show them if the board's interested in seeing them at this time.
If you'd like, I can pretty much describe what they are. Again, if they...
Joe, hold just one second.
Okay.
Are there any questions from the staff, from the board concerning materials?
No, not for
No.
me.
Okay,
Not
thanks,
for me.
Joe. All right.
Okay. Our only real concern and comment was to eliminate a wire cut brick that was being used for runners and replace it with one of the molded brick submitted but in an accent color. It's noted that the tower element has been changed back. That I think is a good thing. We also note that the color of the sails has been downplayed and like that as well. And staff sees no need for a mock-up on this project. With that, our recommendation is for final approval with staff and board comments and final review by staff.
Thank you, Lawrence. Joe, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
No, I'm fine.
Okay. Board discussion.
This is Luda Soaptube. Project seems to progress really nicely, and everything what we discussed been mitigated and brought to the conclusion. Personally, I like the change of the colors of the sails. They will complement a little bit better the surround enclosures of the pilasters. The tower is seems to be in between of very whimsical and straightforward, but it has its kind of wove element. So, and I think it's done nicely. Thank you.
Luda, would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I would move for the final approval with staff and board comments, with final review by staff.
So Luda has moved for a final approval with final review and approval by staff. Is that right, Luda?
That's correct.
Is there a second to that motion?
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Leon has seconded Luda's motion. Is there any further discussion?
No.
Ms. Subject, how do you vote?
Yay in favor?
Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yay in favor?
Ms. Wheeler, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
This is James Metters. I vote yay in favor, so it passes unanimously. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item is 54 St. Philip. They are requesting preliminary approval for new construction of addition and renovation of the Simmons Center for the Arts. The building is not rated in no particular neighborhood. It is post 1976. It is in a 4-6 height district in the old and historic district. Some context photos show an aerial with the cistern of the college right here, Calhoun on the north. This building is not in the project, or this portion of the building is not included in project. The greenway is right through here. This is the existing sunken terrace portion. This is looking at the same thing, looking south. This is what's across the street. This is across the street as well, with the greenway being here. And previous motion was for conceptual approval with staff comments and board comments. And board comments included one board member said, in many ways, it's sculptural, colorful, and inviting. As for the green, which I think that's a transcription error. I think it should read, as for the screen, I think it will work really well, as it is a gesture to the curtain because of the theater. Nice contrast between same material but differently textured and colored. The screen could be glass or aluminum. I know that the board member said like the alternating angle of the windows on the first floor. An interesting feature. Courtyard is much better than it was. They liked the ends, gives a nice pop of color to a building that is mostly brick. And the member agreed with staff recommendations and said that they like the colors. The name of the school is on the canopy. One board member observed, which balances it out. Previous staff comments, staff included the demolition of the existing wings as incidental to the renovation addition of the Simmons Center, as we have done with many other projects. The building is non-historical, and portions proposed for replacement at the street do not relate well to the street. They also no longer function for the center, and the need to adapt to the changing needs of the college. The subgrade courtyard is underutilized and not ideal, although it is nice that it terminates the greenway. This important termination of the greenway has been retained with the new entry on its axis. Generally, this is a sensitive approach to the design that works well with the existing building and refers to the original design. It will enliven the existing building, especially at the street for pedestrians, but also with the colorful fins at the lobby wall. Reference to the college palette of colors, and the area is helpful in this regard. The layout of the entry courtyard feels unresolved and somewhat of a lost opportunity that should be developed further. The canopy design should be developed to be simple but interesting. Overall, a restrained and interesting design, and with that, our recommendation at that time was conceptual approval with staff conditions noted. And with
Okay,
that,
Andy.
All right, thank you very much, Lawrence. Again, we are here. I'm Andy Clark with Leo Architecture, representing the College of Charleston. Thank you for your time. Just kind of wanted to give you a brief overview of some of the design drivers, again, from conceptual to be deferential to Randolph Hall in terms of height, scale, and mass, to be referential to the existing Simmons Center in terms of materials and details, to really respond to the greenway and that strong axis as being an important part of the college, and create a really defined entrance that leads you into a new transparent lobby space as a pre-function area for the arts. So if you can go to the next slide, I can say there weren't a lot of comments at the conceptual. Some of the comments we have developed further is the courtyard design, as well as the material for the fins at the lobby, as well as the brick color for the addition compared to the existing. So we'll talk a little bit about those three things as we go through. We'll start with some of the Sanborn maps. If you go to the next slide. And just a recap, you can see on the left the modest Randolph Hall across the street from our site that's dashed in black. And you can see as Randolph Hall started to grow and expand into the cistern yard that we know today, the residential scale of the site. And then the next slide, you can see over the years, some of the residential buildings started to deteriorate and be replaced with more institutional scale buildings and become more of a college campus. And on the next slide, you see zoomed in to the site. On the left is the Cato Center, and then the right in the darker black is the site that the Simmons Center occupies. So you can see on the bottom, the Simmons Center overlaid in 1976, adjacent to the Cato Center before the Cato was built. On the next slide, you can see a picture of the Simmons Center after completion, and the shadow wall that has a column that terminates the end of the axis as one of the things we wanted to try to improve upon to strengthen that access to the greenway. On the next slide, you can see some of those pictures of the existing, the greenway being a great pedestrian way right behind Randolph Hall, connecting through the crosswalk, and views looking up and down St. Philip Street. On the next slide, you'll see some of the existing photos from the cistern yard. You can see we have the opaque stucco wall and the heavy landscaping that kind of shields the view of the Simmons Center. And then as you go out onto the street, you can see looking north up St. Philip there. On the next slide, we have some photos of the existing sunken courtyard. And you can see in the top left photo how the landscape wall and the landscaping really block the pedestrians from coming into that courtyard, making it more of a private space. And the sunken courtyard has had flooding issues in this area, which makes it less utilized. So that was one of the other items we wanted to address with this proposal. Next slide. So here's the site diagram of the existing, and if you go to the next slide, it'll show you the existing entryways, and you can see the terminus of the greenway. You divide and go into 2 entryways into the building. So the current building has 5 secondary entry points. So we wanted to consolidate that on the next slide with our proposed site diagram. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the arrow as the greenway goes straight into a new canopy that comes out to the sidewalk and has a clearly defined entrance to the new lobby space. Next slide. So mentioned the courtyard development. Previously at Conceptual, we had conceptualized a sculptural fountain element that was very early, and it was a little bit more passive. And as we developed it, we really wanted to make it more of an active space that's part of the public realm and make it more of a seating area. So we provided more hardscaping. And if you go to the next slide, we'll show you some of the concepts of, as you see in the courtyard, we've got actually movable benches that can be reconfigured to serve multiple purposes. You can see some of the material palette, ginkgo trees to provide shade along the western side, and native species, drought tolerant native species, as well as the Teco block paver, which is a permeable paver system in that courtyard. And if you go to the next slide, we'll show you some of those configurations. So the bottom right image, you can see a darker color. That's a track that these benches can slide back and forth. So what you see in the 3 different configurations are either on the top left, creating a stage for theatrical performance or music performance. On the bottom left is more of an outdoor classroom, seminar style setup. And on the upper right becomes more of an informal, casual space for students and pedestrians to come in and sit. So on the next slide, you kind of get a sense of what that, with our mannequin there doing some miming on top of the stage setup, and you can see the tracks that can be moved. So it becomes an active space, really inviting people in and creating a space that can be used by the students, but also the public. Next slide. And then this is a further view of the site plan. On the south end of the building, we are installing subsurface storage for stormwater to reduce the stormwater discharge from the site. So after those are installed, obviously we'll have to go in with new paving and some new landscaping to soften the edge around the building. Next slide. And then this is the demolition plan, just as a reminder to show you in the upper left area. We are demolishing and rebuilding in that area that is hatched, the sculpture and scene shops, and it'll be rebuilt. It's a 2-story volume now, being rebuilt as a 3-story volume, so we can get as much of the program away from St. Philip Street as possible for deferential to the height of Randolph Hall. And it also supports the new central energy plant along the rooftop, again, trying to keep that equipment out of the public view. And then on the St. Philip Street side, a 2-story wing will be partially demolished, and that's so we can make way for a new black box theater that can infill that area, but not infringe on the courtyard terminus of the greenway. And I think the next slides, you can go through these fairly quickly. Floor plans really haven't changed much. The massing hasn't changed very much. We do have a black box theater on the first floor. As you go up to the second floor, you see some new classroom spaces and costume design and a theater design shop. And then going to the third floor, you can see the previous and the current and previous very similar in plan. Go to the next slide. Enlargements of the two second floor. Go one more to the third floor. We'll show you a comparison. Again, the floor plan is very similar, previous and current. And then we have two enlarged plans to show you closer views of those floor plans. And if you can keep going, Lawrence, up to the fourth floor, we have the printmaking studio to the left and the arts management to the right. Floor plan has changed very little since conceptual in this floor as well. And then if you'll keep going, you can go up to the roof plan. Enlargements of the fourth floor. If you keep going, we'll get to the roof plan. You can see the hatched area is the existing roof to remain, and the white area on the upper is the new roof area. That's the same in the lower current plan with just some reconfiguration of mechanical on the back side. And then we have some enlarged blow-ups of that if you keep going. Keep going on to the slide 34. So this is the slide that shows you some of our exterior materials. Obviously the existing Simmons Center is predominantly masonry, a brown brick, and we would like the new material for all the additions to be an analogous but complementary brick color. So we're looking at a little bit of a darker reddish brown for that area. And we'll show you some samples and pictures in a minute to better illustrate that. The sunshades at the lobby. In the conceptual, we were proposing aluminum powder coated, and there was some commentary about that maybe being too cold of a material. We've taken that into consideration, and we are proposing in this middle doing a glazed terracotta, which responds to the terracotta capitals at Randolph Hall right across the street, as well as a natural material responding to BAR principles. And then on the accents with the return, we've got the glazed brick accents that are green to reference the green shutters at Randolph Hall, also across the street. So we'll show you more in the renderings what that looks like. Next slide. So the colors, we felt it important for an art center to really bring in some pops of color. We wanted those colors to be really informed by the immediate campus. So these are all buildings that are along the greenway and the core of the college campus, and using those colors as our palette that will be used on the terracotta fins that are glazed to provide sun shields. Next slide. So these terracotta baguettes you can see in the left is the shape that we're proposing for that baguette material. And then you see the range of colors that respond to those campus colors that we've referenced previously. The next slide, you can see on the left, these are actual color matches on the left to all of the different versions of green that are currently existing on Randolph Hall. So we thought it'd be nice to use that to create a mosaic of glazed brick colors that respond to all those to give it a little bit of depth and texture on those accent pieces. And then on the right, what you see is the proposed brick being held up adjacent to the existing brick on site. So you can see it's a little bit darker red brick with some flashes of brown. So a reddish brown rather than a sandy brown. So it's very complementary, but also differentiated. It's really hard to represent that in the rendering, so we wanted to show you this. We've tried to capture that a little better in the renderings that we'll show you, but wanted to show you the actual brick in the field. Next slide.
What's your grout color on that, Andy? You gonna match the same color?
We haven't gotten to that just yet. That's what's really hard to represent, but we are gonna look at that in the mock-up. And I think we can go quickly through these elevations. You see the previous and current are very similar. The south elevation, as you keep moving, you'll go to the fire lane elevation. You can see very little change on those. And then some of the minor elevations that don't show up on the street views on the courtyard sides. Building sections have not changed. The massing is still the same. You can go through those fairly quickly. And then we should be getting to some of the mass models. So this gives you a sense of the scale. We've got 4 different views just showing how the addition, the 2-story addition, and then the 3-story addition on the back with mechanical on the roof. Go next slide. Okay, next slide. And then here's our previous versus current. You can see in the previous rendering, the brick was a little bit more of a salmon color, and we've updated that to be a little bit of a darker reddish brown brick. Again, it is hard to capture it exactly in these renderings, but it is a darker color than it was previously. Go to the next slide. It shows you an enlargement of the current. You can see on the canopy, the Simmons Center for the Arts signage, which is cut out of the metal with backlighting to really show that that's the entrance. Go to the next slide. A view from the south looking north up St. Philip Street. So there you can see the addition, 2-story addition against the adjacent brick. You can see the mosaic colors of the accent bricks and the darker brick color being the only primary changes. The next slide. We get a little bit closer to the courtyard. You can see that the fins have been moved into 3 bays rather than 2 at the upper areas due to the span of the terracotta, which works nicely. Next slide. Enlargement there showing the landscaping and the movable benches. Okay, next slide. And just a view of the interior. This isn't part of the exterior view, but the public space that serves as a pre-function area for the theater spaces. Next slide. And then the next slide, final view that shows you the night view as a performance, and it glows as a beacon for the arts and invites people to come in for the performances. And you can see that it hasn't really changed very much in this regard, looking from down the Greenway. And then the next slide is an enlarged view of that. And that's the last.
Andy, are you about wrapped up? Are you about close?
That's the last. I was going to say that's our last slide. We do have the preliminary construction documents in the set for review if you like, but I was going to stop here and open it to questions.
Thank you. Are there any board questions, or Lawrence, do you have any questions?
No.
Carol Wheeler, I have just a few questions. And one question is regarding the angled inset that you can see on this perspective right now on the second floor to the left of the entry canopy. And I was just wondering if why those angled, why the angled brick is not a glazed green brick, or what the idea of those angles were, because I wasn't there at the first conceptual review.
Yes, thank you. So those are, since that is part of the black box theater, there are no windows in that space. And so since it's not part of an actual window, those are actually recessed with a light cove to create a little bit of a breaking up of the facade of the portion that's visible from the Greenway. So the glazed brick is reserved for the angled jambs at the actual windows. And so that's why those angled were not shown as glazed.
Okay. And to the left of that, in the previous version, you had the name of the school there, but you decided to eliminate that?
Correct. There was a lot of discussion about that, and we felt it was competing with the signage on the canopy that reads the Simmons Center for the Arts. And so we've removed that signage so it doesn't compete with the main entry.
Okay. And the last question I had was regarding the movable seats. They seem to be concrete and wood covered, I think. but in one rendering, they seem to be colored. Can you explain that a little bit further?
Yeah, we were looking at trying to bring some of the colors in from the screen wall at the lobby into the benches to tie those together, and then working on the details for how the top of that would work as well.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Very quick one. This is Luda Brook. Talking about these benches and movable situation, and you mentioned the tracks. Are they trip hazard, those tracks in a courtyard? Kind of, how that will work?
How the track will work? Well, we've got some details in the set. The intent is for them to be lockable so that the college can lock those, and they'll be very heavy so they won't move very easily. So they'll be reconfigured, and the track is, I believe there's some details in there, but we do have a track detail of how those can slide.
Okay, but they are not flush with the surface, is that correct? With the surface of the paving?
Great, the tracks are recessed into the paving.
Mm. Okay.
Are there any other questions? Is there any public comment? Linda, do we have any public comment?
Linda, if you are there, you are muted. Okay, well, let's assume that she has stepped away.
This is Justin Schwebler from Historic Charleston. She let me in for my comments.
Oh,
Okay, Justin, go ahead.
very good. Thank you.
Again, this is Justin Schwebler with Historic Charleston Foundation. We'd like to thank the applicants for their detailed presentation to the HCF staff last week and ongoing dialogue with the foundation throughout the entirety of this design process. We have a few comments regarding the remodeled St. Philip Street entrance. While we appreciate the reference to historic structures with the color palette choices on the terracotta baguettes, we feel that the current color scheme undermines the delicate minimalist design of the new entrance. The screening is too far removed from the historic buildings they reference for any meaningful connection to be drawn. We feel that using copper glazing on the terracotta would be more complementary to the overall design and to help accentuate the other colors used on the structure. With regards to the rest of the proposed elevations, we prefer the new color selection of the red brick and the green glazed bricks. We feel that the green glazing in the window recesses goes a long way to creating a much more legible architectural dialogue with the historic structures on CFC's campus. As Kara mentioned, we would like to see the green glazing also used on the second story angled portions of the Black Box Theater elevation as well. We prefer the original cantilever design of the front canopy. We feel that this creates a more open and free-flowing entrance into the building without the column and provides a more architecturally striking bridge between the interior and exterior spaces. We prefer the original layout of the plaza green space with seating areas, water feature, and more robust planting schemes. While the new design is clever and provides exterior lecture space, we would like to see a more robust green space to connect the plaza with the greenway on the opposite side of St. Philip Street. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Linda, are you there? Lawrence, do you know if we have any other?
My presenter and commenter sheet shows that Justin is the only one for this project. So
Andy, do you, I'm sorry, Lawrence, would you go ahead with your comments, please?
okay. Staff comments include that this project continues to develop nicely. The previous concern regarding the courtyard has been artfully addressed. While staff might normally be reluctant to entertain some of the colors being introduced in various locations here, these seem to work well on a building housing the School of the Arts. The terracotta baguettes have an integral aluminum core, which helps to allay staff's concerns about durability. And with that, our recommendation is for preliminary approval with staff and board comments.
All right, thank you, Lawrence. Andy, would you like to respond to either the public comments or the staff comments?
I would say we appreciate the comments, and we'd love to work further with staff as we move forward. If the board was so inclined, we'd request a final approval by staff, but no additional comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Board discussion.
This is Tara Wheeler. I might start. It's the first time I see this project, and I thought it's an interesting approach to relate to the existing building, which in some ways, which in my mind doesn't express the study of the arts at all currently. But I think you were very successful in adding to this building and in reskinning it, and suddenly you're able to make the whole composition of the building, including the existing, look contemporary and appropriate for the School of the Arts. So I think it's a very successful design. I really appreciate the creative use of the colors and the materials. The terracotta is a wonderful material, and I think it's appropriate to use it in the screen. It is even set back into the courtyard, so it's not even on the right-of-way, which might alleviate some of the concerns from the Historic Charleston Foundation. But I do think that this project needs the color, and it works very well, and I love the inspiration that you used for that. I think the canopy, the changes to the canopy are positive, how you disengage that from the brick wall. Looks very nice. And I actually walked past the sunken courtyard on Tuesday evening while it was raining, and the students there had a lecture, or I think a theater lesson outside, and they had a tent up because it was raining, and they used the outdoor courtyard. So I think it's a big improvement what you did to the courtyard to make it usable, to eliminate the water feature, and give it the ability to make it an outdoor classroom, or to make it usable for the public. One idea might be that because the college is currently using tents, maybe you could think further about how, in case of rain, how you could provide some shade just in a temporary way, so that it will be a pity if you see in a couple of years, if this project will be built, that they put a tent up there and you couldn't really see any of your beautiful facade that you're building there. So maybe you could think about that. But other than that, I think it's a great project. It's very detailed. And I would think if the board doesn't have a lot of questions, I would feel comfortable with definitely preliminary approval, but also final review by staff. But I'd like to hear what the board, of course, has to say. as well, the rest of the board.
This is Leon, and I'm in agreement. I think it's a fabulous project. It looks, it's just an amazing job. Really complements what's already there, but enhances the beauty even more. I'm in agreement that with the staff recommendation.
This is Luda. So, yeah. So I have to commend the really nice progress of this project. Actually, what I'm looking at, it tells me this is art school. You know, it's a very elegant and a lot of nice details which are coming together nicely. Some of talking about the colors, the terracotta and all that, it's actually, you captured the pretty much typical Charleston colors in it, which is represented around the campus. So it's sort of that notch there too. There was a question about this brick angular recess on the theater side. I think they should stay same color as the rest of the wall, mainly because you have that waved green in the whole first floor. So they will, if you introduce the greens there, it will be competing with that wave on same side. The form of that recess is reflecting what is on other side of the courtyard, and so it's all kind of coming together. I'm not sure about canopy. The cantilevered canopy seems like more floating and maybe nicer, but that's kind of subjective opinion here. Overall, and the movable benches, would like to see how that works years from now. But it's very interesting idea, and hopefully we will have Spoleto poetry readings and this, or something like that in that courtyard. So thank you.
Okay.
So
James, are you having some comments?
Yeah, just a couple of things. Studying the possibility of introducing more green area to balance coming off the greenway. I think that's important, but not at the expense of giving up that area if it's really going to be used as teaching space, because that's just an extension of the building. And that, I mean, that's what it's all about. But if there's a way to introduce, certainly not to shield off the great architecture and the finishes, but just to create a little more balance with the greenway. That's my only comment. Carol, did you have a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion for preliminary approval with board comments regarding landscape and final review by staff.
So Carol,
that would obviously assume that we will see the project again for a mock-up review, but you can scratch that from the motion.
Yes, and you preliminary approval was with staff and board comments?
Yes, you can
Staff
add that
and board comments with final review by staff, and of course we would see the mock-up. Is that right, Carol?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a second to this motion?
This is Luda Sobchuk. I will second that.
So Luda has seconded the motion. Is there any further discussion on this? Ms. Sobchuk, how do you vote?
Yay in favor.
Mr. Scott?
Yay in favor.
Ms. Wheeler?
Yay in favor.
And this is James Metters. I vote yay in favor, so Passes unanimously, and congratulations and nice presentation, Andy.
Thank
Great.
you for your
Yeah.
time.
Okay, and the last item on the agenda is 102 President Street, and we should have it on the record that Ms. Wheeler is recusing. Applicant is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a mixed-use student housing development, requesting one additional story based on architectural merit and context. This is in Kennerborough, Elliottboro. It is in a height district 4, which is actually being rezoned as we speak to a height district 5, and staff has it on very good firm assurance that it will be in a height district 5 very shortly. It is in the old city district. Some context photos. Ariel, this is President going north-south, and Cannon going east-west. The cross towns here, and this this is the site with a large USC parking deck across President on the right of the photo, and these are the B Street of apartments on the east. That's the parking deck, and this is looking west. And with that, we will turn this over to Ms. Wheeler for her presentation.
Can I interrupt for a second? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to my microphone before. I'm looking for a Mike Cottrell who is supposed to speak. There's a Mike K in the attendees. Is that Mike Cottrell? It would be very helpful if everybody would put their last name so I could tell. I'm assuming that is him.
So Linda, I see Caro and I see John and I see a Mike K. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir. I am assuming that Mike K is Mike Cottrell. We do ask that you please put your last names because I have no way of knowing if this is the proper person.
That's right. Thank you, Linda.
I have a question very quickly. My phone is battery is on last bar, and I have no other means of communicating. So what happens if I will run out of juice here?
We would not be able to move forward.
Right.
So do you have a charger?
No, I don't. I usually use the phone in the office, but we had an issue here, so I had to use my cell, and it's almost out.
Luda, is there any chance anybody else there has a charger?
Nobody's here.
I see.
Oh. Is there any way that you could call in on your office line?
Well, we had an issue all day today that we couldn't communicate on those presentations. So, and I didn't know that. I came for this meeting here, so I'm sorry. But let's see how far it will get me, okay?
Okay.
Okay, I'm Carol. There's a chance that Luda's phone goes, it dies, and if so, even if Leon and I both vote for you, and you correct me if I think this is right, Lawrence, and we couldn't move forward, could we?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So I just want to make that as just is what it is, and so we can start and see how it works out. And
Right.
Lawrence, then I need guidance from how to handle that.
Yeah. Let's ask the applicant if they'd like to proceed or defer.
Well, we'd like to proceed.
Okay.
All right, maybe I'll start. This is Carol Wheeler with Goff Antonio Associates. I'm talking on behalf of our GDA team and the landscape architect, Mike Cottrell, and also representing the ownership group with John Villanti and Greg Dillon and Josh Fogel and Lane Prevet. And I would like to request an additional 10 minutes because you see this project for the first time and because of the size of the project. But I will try to be very quick, if that's okay.
So, Carol, let me interrupt you just a minute. Luda, when your phone dies, we won't know that. So.
I will wait.
Okay, and Carol, I'm guessing when that happens, we'll stop the presentation because we can't vote.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
very sorry.
That's okay. Well, I'll try to be quick. Let's move to the first slide. This project is a mixed-use project, and we will provide, the idea is to provide student housing for the MUSC district. And if you proceed to the next slide. The site is located at President Street and Cannon Street, and it marks the gateway to the Cannonboro neighborhood to the east, or left on the screen, but it also marks the gateway to the medical district that you see on the top of the page. Next slide. Next slide. It was mentioned that the site is in a now zoned for a 5-story height district. It actually went through the Planning Commission and to City Council and was approved unanimously after the first reading. So it should move forward after the second and third reading. It will be in the 5-story height district. You see what we have done in those diagrams at the bottom is to show our site as a red area. And those diagrams show how our site is nestled between a row of parking garages that are shown in blue. To the west of the site, it's a 6-story parking garage, and then to the west of that is another future 8-story parking garage and an existing 8-story parking garage. To the south of our site, that you see in pink, is the medical district that's very high density and goes up to 11 stories. There's one medical building to the right of our site behind the B Street Flats building that is 4 stories, but has a very generous ceiling height, so it appears as 5 stories. And then to the north of our site, you see the lower residential scale of the Cannonboro neighborhood. Next slide. This is the closer view of our site, and you see in the center that our property is flanked by very broad streets, and there's no significant historic context that we need to relate to. There's no particular architectural language or consistent language. It's really a mix of, at the top left is the B Street Flats building, a yellow stucco building that was developed as a motel with very low floor heights and exterior corridors and exposed parking on the first floor. On the other side, we have a 6-story parking garage that has a recessed corner facing the intersection that I just explained as a gateway into 2 different neighborhoods. And it's a very weak corner currently. There's a transformer there, and it doesn't really address the importance of the intersection. Then across from our side is a Gnome Cafe. That's the only building right now that activates the streetscape here. And then to the north of our side, we have the a pump station that that basically helps with the flooding issues in this area, but it gives our site a little bit more breathing space and puts 120 feet between our property line and the adjacent and the next Charleston single house. Then we also have future development, future townhomes that you see at the bottom of the building, also to the north of our site, and then the MUSC research building that I mentioned that is on the other side of the B Street Flats building. Next slide, please. This is the current site plan showing some of the challenges of the site, which is that in this intersection we have frequent floodings just from heavy rain events, and hopefully the pump station to the north of our site that you see here will help with that, but we are addressing the flooding issue in our design as well. Next slide. This is the view of our building footprint, basically a C-shaped building that opens up towards President Street with an amenity space, which makes sense from a sensitivity point of view to place that opposite the parking garage. And then the more quiet facade we place against the residential building to the east. And on that residential building on the right side, we showed a couple of photos of those exterior corridors that I mentioned previously. You have, this is basically the access to the units. You have solid doors, and you have very small windows here that are actually windows to the bedrooms of the units. The units are of that adjacent building are arranged in that way that they have an internal living room, and only the bedroom is facing our site. And when we walked out there, pretty much 99% of those windows had shading elements in front of them because because the owners want to maintain privacy from people that walking past the corridor. And at the bottom, you see a current green space that the adjacent building has that becomes somewhat unusable as it approaches Cannon Street, and as it ends in a stairwell that is basically projecting out to a 0 lot line. And we have, we will tell you what we're proposing to improve that space as well as the site on our property. Next slide. This is the massing that we're proposing. It's a 5-story building with a setback 6th floor. So we are asking for the additional 6th floor based on architectural merit and context. I described the context earlier before that on this side of Cannon Street, you really have high density, and that this site should actually become, should have a building that has more of a presence than the adjacent parking garage that's currently the tallest building here. What we're doing on the corner of our building is we are proposing a colonnade with an elevated seating area to activate that intersection. And we also, the garage entry to our site is also off of President Street. And as you look at the east side of our building, the right diagram, it shows the previous green space that you saw of the adjacent building. What we are proposing is to take away the wood fence and increase this green space and make it actually usable and make it a shared green space that will be accessed off of Cannon Street to a pocket park. So you see here how we're pushing back our massing and contribute back to the public with a seating area. And then we are creating a connection from Cannon Street to B Street, which is currently not there. Currently, you can't really access the adjacent properties from Cannon Street. Next slide. At the bottom, you see a side section through Cannon Street with the parking garage to the left, our building in the center, and then the B Street Flats building and the MUSC building, research building to the right. So that shared green space that I was talking about, you can see at the top right as well. But here in section, you see that we're proposing a much wider space here than occurs on the other side of the B Street Flats building. And we have created a double step back on that facade with a 5-foot step back on the second floor, and then an additional 9 or 10-foot step back on the 5th and 6th floor to give enough light to that shared green space. Next slide. This is the landscape plan, and I'll have Mike Cottrell just briefly mention the streetscape improvements that we're planning for the site and the shared green space. Mike is there. Oh,
Can
no.
we? No.
You can do it.
I just, since this is a stop, let me look at my car very quickly. I had the wires there, so, okay? I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
Well, that's fine.
Anyone hear me?
Yes, barely,
Hi, this is Mike Cottrell. Can you guys hear me?
barely, Mike.
Okay. I'll wait until we get this back.
Okay. Might want to test your volume a little bit while we're
A bit lower.
waiting.
Got a little better.
Not much.
How about this?
That's a,
Okay.
Who's going to do it?
Mike, are you having trouble? Otherwise, we can cover the landscape portion.
I think I'm figuring it out.
Okay, I have a wire. I have to go to my,
all right.
Yay.
All right.
made it.
I have to go to my and
Good
look
job, Luna.
just, let's see what you presented, but at least I would hear, okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so I guess the best way to start with this is on President Street, and then just move clockwise around the building. So you can see on President Street, we're doing sidewalk improvement with concrete sidewalks and new tree wells. The sidewalk's going to be 10 feet wide and bordered with raised planters and stairs and seating that looks out towards President Street. These raised planters also act as an edge for the raised patio area, which will have specialty paving and will provide seating. As you move around to Cannon Street, the sidewalk is a bit wider, it's 11 feet over there. And as you move up to the northeast side of the building, there's another raised
either through stairs or a ramp that goes up, with a focal point of a green wall right as you go up the ramp. And that helps transition into the pocket park. So as you move into the pocket park, there's a main walkway that runs the length of the park with a lawn space on the east side, and it makes its way to a raised deck. And it's bordered by a row of understory trees. Underneath the deck is a rain garden that'll act as a piece that'll help drain inside and clean the water flow through that area. And then along the parking garage on that east side, we're proposing to do a green or a living wall to help block that parking from space. And the idea behind the design of this space is for it to be a shared space for both the residents of this development and for the B Street class. And then you can see another walkway that heads to the back of the site and out to the parking area behind there, and then just buffer plantings along that south edge. And if you move to the next screen, we are just giving you an idea of the full deck. It's really not visible from the street, but it includes a full fire pit, ground seating, and next slide. Here's an idea of some of the elements that we're going to have on the ground plane. You can see the living fin, some of the seating samples, some of the raised planter type examples, a green wall, and kind of the idea of what that turf space might be like in the pocket park. And the next slide.
Right.
There's some images of the tank.
All right, thank you, Mike. I think that covers the landscape portion, right?
Yes, that's the whole.
I think then I'll continue with the architectural expression now. So proceed to the next slide. Or maybe while we're here, just briefly, I haven't mentioned yet that we will provide all the required parking on the site. We don't need any additional parking. This is a costly solution. We have we will need a 4-tier stacker, and we will need to have partial pits within that parking garage. But this allows us to not only put the parking self-sufficiently on site, but it also creates retail spaces that are deeper than the typical 30 feet that the BIR requires, and makes those spaces very usable and hopefully rentable. And this slide shows also, in addition to the wide, to the 10-foot or actually 11-foot sidewalks at the corner that we're providing, or that we will incorporate in the design, we are extending the feel of the sidewalk into our colonnade that we're providing on the intersection. And in general, besides street trees and street lights, we're also looking at putting the electricity, the electrical lights underground, and incorporate other improvements to the site. And if you could now proceed to page 21. And I'd like to talk about the general architectural direction of this project. And I mentioned before that this site is a gateway site to the Cannonboro neighborhood and the medical district, and ends basically the row of parking garages as you approach the site from West Ashley. And so this building deserves a gateway building. And we looked at corner buildings in the historic context in Charleston, and what the historic buildings typically do is that they either have a special corner, chamfered or round corner, or maybe a higher parapet or a stronger cornice element. In some occasions on the top right, corner buildings just continue the punched openings and have a solid corner. But if you then look at contemporary corner precedents in Charleston, you see the addition of glazed corner elements or corner balconies, so a much more dynamic approach to that corner expression. Then we also looked at the MUSC architecture precedents and started with an architectural language that related more to that, but we went away from it. But we still we like the typology of the colonnade that we included in our design, which you will see later. And in general, for the architectural expression that we're proposing, we're looking at a light-colored brick building. We're obviously still studying materials and colors, but light-colored brick building with deep inset windows, and not necessarily a differentiation with another material of the first floor versus the upper floors. But we'd like to bring the brick down and take a more contemporary approach, but with very elegant brick detailing. Next slide. Next slide. And this is a view from the intersection looking at the building. Again, I had mentioned before that we are incorporating the colonnade. This helps us to elevate the retail space behind the facade slightly and incorporate an ADA access. And this alleviates the flooding issues that occur at this intersection. And in addition to that, I mentioned the wider sidewalks that continue into the colonnade. And on the right side, you see a view of that activated colonnade that really responds to the Gnome Cafe on the other side of the street, which is currently a lonely activator, you could say. There's nothing else around here. Next slide. This is a view from President Street showing how we are expressing the two brick masses and then create some relief on this 200-foot-long facade with our amenity deck. The amenity deck will be properly screened, and in the background you see a lighter mass that where we're proposing a metal panel. Next slide, I think that would show that a little bit better. This slide shows in the background the lighter gray material that we're proposing. But for the main brick anchors, we're showing this light-colored brick detailing, and we are proposing a 1/3 window facade composition. And to make our corner special, we have proposed this corner glazing, but we have also studied what would happen is if we would recreate or regain the symmetry on this facade, because President Street is such a symmetrical facade, and showed a couple of design studies that we're still continuing to develop. But again, here you see that we're proposing a wood ceiling, a nice wood ceiling in the colonnade, specialty brick pavers and brick detailing. Next slide. These are some views of at the top. You see the approach from Lower and Upper Cannon Street. So at the top left, you see the MUSC Research Building at the top left that has tried to create a colonnade, but it's not really very usable. So we are continuing that idea, but actually make it usable with our pocket park and the corner expression. And then as you look at Cannon Street from the other side, as you come from West Ashley, again, this is what I tried to explain earlier, that our context shows that on the right side of Cannon Street, or so on the south side of Cannon Street, we have very high density. We have a 6-story parking garage, and it's currently our site has an existing parking lot, and it abruptly that scale comes down, and you see the B Street Flats building. So we do think that our site needs a gateway building that marks that entry into the Cannon Borough neighborhood. And we are asking for the 6th floor, for the addition of the 6th floor. And we designed it that way that when you stand right in front of the building, the top floor is stepped back, so it's not it's visually significant. But as you take more distance from the side, that penthouse is actually creating a top and makes the building more iconic. Next slide. This is a view from Cannon Street, how our building meets the B Street Flats building, the yellow stucco building on the left. Currently, there's a wood fence on the B Street flat side that continues all the way to, that's not the right building, it's at the very top. This was just a precedent at the bottom left. But currently the site is not very approachable, and what we are doing is we are stepping our building massing back, we're creating this pocket park, and then creating a gate into that shared green space. Next slide. Next slide, I think you can keep going. We have a couple of shadow studies, I think. These are the elevations. Generally, we're proposing brick. These are the courtyard elevations. We are proposing brick and then a lighter colored metal panel, lighter metal panel. And these are shadow studies that we use to develop our massing to be sensitive towards the B Street flats group, the neighbors that face our property. And what we did is we created this double step back that I explained earlier. And when we compare this double step back of our 6-story building to a 4-story building at the bottom, you will see that during the core hours when that green space will actually receive direct sunlight, there's no significant difference. So that step back is really effective, and it would not make any difference from a shading point of view to a 4-story building that's right at that same position. Next slide. These were some images we included in our presentation just to show you the design process. As I mentioned before, at the beginning, we oriented ourselves a little bit towards the MUSC architecture and the language, but we wanted to become less commercial or institutional, and we developed it to the point where we are right now. And up to now, we have met several times with the historic groups. We work closely together with city staff and Lawrence Courtney, and we met with the Cannonboro neighborhood several times, and also with the adjacent neighbors of the B Street Flats group. And we always appreciated their input, and I'm sure we're going to hear something tonight as well. But this is a product of the consensus finding that we did. And continue to the next slide. These were some studies that we did in response to some concerns that the Preservation Society had regarding the colonnade spacing. And this is obviously not at an end, but this is a design in process. And next slide shows a couple of studies that we did regarding the corner glazing and how large it should be, or if it should just be a simple brick mass with a solid corner and punched openings. But we feel that that this building can take a more contemporary approach and can have this corner glazing to make this intersection special. And as I had mentioned before, we do ask tonight for conceptual approval and the addition of the 6th floor. And we think we have presented this site and explained the context very well, that the site can actually support a 6th floor. And in terms of the architectural merit, we do contribute to the public with our wider sidewalks, with our colonnade, with our step backs, and the shared green space that without the 6th floor would not necessarily be viable, but the 6th floor makes it possible for us to use these nicer materials and incorporate these extra architectural and site features. And with this, I'm open to any questions that the board or city staff may have.
Thanks, Carol. Questions from Lawrence or the board?
Carol, this is Yoda. What high district you are in? What?
This is, it has recently been rezoned, or it's being rezoned to 5 stories. It was previously 4. It is now 5 stories. It has passed unanimously the city council first reading. There is now a second and a third reading that needs to continue, but we have consulted with city staff, and it was agreed that since the first reading was unanimously approved, we can proceed based on the 5-story on the assumption that this will eventually become a 5-story height district. And this 5-story height district does allow us to ask for a full additional floor based on context and architectural merit.
Okay, thank you.
Lawrence, do you have any questions?
No, I do not at this time.
Good.
I have none.
Is it public comment?
James, we first have Andrew Gould. So if Andrew will unmute himself.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Andrew Gould. I'm speaking on behalf of the Cannon-Borough-Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association. The applicants have met with us extensively about this project over the past couple of months. And the Neighborhood Association is quite enthusiastic about this. We think that overall the concept of the building is a positive influence on the neighborhood. You know, that intersection is, of course, probably the most regrettable intersection in our neighborhood, if not the whole city. And so we're quite excited about having a building there. And functionally, this building is going to be quite good because it's providing a lot of MUSC housing. It's going to relieve pressure on the historic housing stock in our neighborhood by getting some of those students out of the old houses so families can move in. And we're very pleased to see all of this retail on the ground floor that, you know, it's not just a token gesture, it's really some serious retail down there that's going to bring life and activity to that end of the neighborhood, help bring people, you know, down from the more commercial eastern end of the neighborhood. So overall, we're very positive about this. We supported the rezoning to 5 stories, and were it possible to have rezoned it to 6 stories, we would have supported that. This particular site it doesn't have any historic buildings around it. It's surrounded by big, ugly buildings that we're quite happy to block the view of. So we're perfectly happy for this to be a 6-story building if the BAR can see fit to approve that. You know, it might be nice if they do something a little more interesting architecturally with that 6th story to show it off. But in any event, we see no downside to it having a 6th story. In terms of the appearance of the building, the one concern we have is that the language of the facades is implying load-bearing masonry, but it's a little unconvincing structurally because it's kind of top-heavy looking. It's a little unsettling right now that the upper stories are quite heavy looking and the colonnade is fairly slender. I think the building would just look a lot more comfortable and resolved if they made the windows bigger, the brick piers between the windows narrower, get more glass upstairs, lighten the upper stories a little bit, maybe have a change of material so that the columns look a little stronger. You know, maybe the upstairs is a darker color, maybe the columns are a lighter color, or have granite cladding. Just something to make it look like the bottom of the building is stronger than the top of the building, the way a masonry facade should look. Likewise, the corner glazing seems illogical. You know, there's nothing to support that brick cornice wrapping the corner. And we feel that having a corner element doesn't help the building just because it's a C-shaped building and all the focus should be on the central courtyard. So on that last slide she showed where it shows the option of having just a solid corner, we feel that that's a much more resolved, stronger design. Let's try to get some real architectural detail and focus to bring people's attention to the central courtyard and let the side wings of the building just be side wings and not try to pull so much focus there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Next, we have Erin Minigan.
Thank you. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for reaching out and walking us through the project. We also appreciate their effort to conduct studies of the design based on our feedback. However, we are opposed to this request due to the general architectural direction, mass scale, and most importantly, height. We did not oppose the upzoning from 4 to 5 stories, as we could envision a 4.5 or 5-story building with a setback top floor as being appropriate for the site, and the ordinance does not provide parameters for how to review height district rezonings, but we do not see justification for an additional 6-story. The ordinance specifically directs the board to only grant additional height when it adds value to the architecture and is in harmony with the surrounding context. In this case, we feel strongly the 6th floor does not enhance the design and exacerbates the height of the building, which is greatly out of scale with the nearby neighborhood and is taller than adjacent buildings. This is an important gateway site to the Cannon-Borough-Elliott Borough neighborhood, and the architecture speaks far more to the medical district than it does to the neighborhood character. Our hope is the design could be revisited to soften the contemporary commercial elements to better relate to residential context. Specifically, the eroded glass corner, asymmetrical facade, and tall colonnade ground floor are more akin to the architecture associated with MUSC and jarring in relation to the neighborhood. The building is pushed right up to the sidewalk and overwhelms the street corner. We would suggest pushing the building footprint back to be more in line with the neighboring buildings along Cannon Street, as well as restudying the corner design to better reflect the examples referenced on the top of page 21, where there is a more rational structural basis behind the architecture and detail is layered on top. The fenestration and ground floor should also be restudied with a more residential scale and character. We would remind the board of the approach taken with the design review of the recent townhome project right across the street at 144 Cannon, where reducing the height was emphasized to be more compatible with the residential streetscape. Due to the level of restudy needed and appropriateness of the additional height, we ask the board deny this request to allow the project team to return with a more context-sensitive proposal. Thank you.
Next, we have Justin from Historic Charleston.
Thank you. This is Justin Schwebler from Historic Charleston Foundation. We would first like to thank the applicants for their detailed presentation of 102 President Street to HCF staff after their submission to the VAR. Following our meeting, we had a good overall impression of the project with some notable concerns, which are as follows. The central massing on the President Street elevation should have a similar material application to the adjacent elevations on the plaza. We feel that the entire elevation of the metal panels as drawn accentuates the expansion joints and takes away from the architectural merit of the brick panel cladding that dominates the structure. We would also like there to be taller, more robust screening on the pool plaza level from the street. As it stands, the raised plaza level makes the building seem a bit like a beachfront hotel. The paneling under the windows and wrapping the Cannon Street corner is listed as metal paneling or similar horizontal siding. We believe that this should be executed in single flat metal panels, preferably of a high quality material like or comparable to bronze. We would like greater clarification for the material choice on the recessed portions of the elevations, particularly the center section of the Cannon Street elevation. This dark panel material seems too monolithic and flat. In order to achieve the height variance for architectural merit, we believe greater attention to ornamentation and delineation of depth between cladding, windows, and glazing should be emphasized, as well as an elevation in the quality of materials used across the entirety of the structure. The stair tower on the south elevation should be flush with the rest of the facade and not accentuated by a different material treatment, especially over such a uniform massing. We also believe the greater attention should be paid to the south elevation's material choice overall, and that the metal paneling should be limited to the top floor in keeping with the Cannon Street and President Street elevations. We also have concerns about the impact this building has on the neighboring apartments. The step backs on the east elevation are a generous attempt to provide more light and airflow to the shared green space, but we feel, however, this building will make the corridor almost cave-like at almost any time besides midday. We would like, again, to thank the applicants for their openness and communication throughout the design process. We feel it's not always our duty to stand in opposition to developments like this, but to ensure that proposals will go a long way towards increasing the livability of the livability and architectural standards of the surrounding community. We feel that the establishment of a retail and restaurant space on this corner and providing a greater concentration of MUSC students outside the neighborhood housing stock will be beneficial to achieving those ends. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
And next we have Brent Lindley.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect, thanks. Thanks for listening to all of us tonight. I know it's been multiple hours already. I am the manager of the regime, or the HOA over at 40 B Street. We're 84 different properties. We've got homeowners that live there. We have renters that live there. So we kind of provide to the community on really this side of MUSC. I'm speaking tonight on behalf of our entire board of directors, as well as our full regime, again, of 84 units. I also want to thank the architects, Goff Antonio, for all of the meetings we've had since that zoning meeting where they did get that height increase to 5 stories. They've listened to a lot of the things that we had to say. They've taken this green space that's between our buildings and put that in really at our suggestion. There is no land use agreement there yet. So be aware that 70–80% of that plan is not on their proposed land. But we do appreciate them working to make that. We also share the concerns that were just aired about the almost tunnel effect that is being created by this building there. But again, we do want to take a moment to appreciate the stepped back approach that is there to create a little bit more airspace, even though we are still within feet of the front door and the windows of our condos that are there. That's a hard thing to think about, just something totally blocking out your sunlight in front of a residential building. In terms of a larger picture of the project, it is more than just our building. It's also the neighborhood, Canterbury Elliott Borough, which is 1- and 2-story homes and shops. That's the neighborhood. That's the identity of it. This is really trying to be more like MUSC. It's trying to be bigger. Bigger isn't better in Canterbury, but it just isn't the identity there. Again, the city originally wanted 4 stories on the lot. They have now increased that to 5 stories. The developer wants a 6-story on an architectural merit. We as a board, as the homeowners association, wonder what that merit would be. The 6-story doesn't seem to add to the building. You could recess a 5th story and have the same effect. The 6th floor, they've said that you won't be able to see it from the street, but really, these pictures are coming from directly underneath the building and looking up. Sure, you can't see it, but coming down crosstown, coming down anywhere else, you're going to be able to see this tower that is just looming over this 1- and 2-story neighborhood. It kind of leads us to the question of, is the public going to look at this massive footprint that maybe it has 4 stories, maybe it has 5 stories, and are they going to say that's an architectural shame the building doesn't have a 6-story? Our opinion is no, that no one is going to miss that if it's not there, and they're going to see it if it is there. So then if it doesn't add anything to the building, I guess we question what the addition to the neighborhood is by adding a 6-story. It shouldn't be about MUSC. It shouldn't be about a parking garage across the street. It should really be about the residents, the people who live in Charleston. It's really creating just a larger presence on an already daunting intersection. They've previously cited, and they just cited, this parking garage across the street for a reason to have architectural merit, to put a 6-story on. But it is not our opinion that a parking garage should serve as the basis for any architectural merit for any property, especially in Charleston. With that said, I do want to reiterate how great they have been to work with. They've really heard our concerns, except for on this mass topic, and they really have worked with us on the eastern and the south elevations to come up with some good ideas. I know it's not finished, but they have worked towards that, so we appreciate that. We do, however, ask the city to deny this attempt to add a sixth floor simply because we don't see the architectural merit for it, not for the building itself and not for its surroundings. And then we also ask the city to protect the identity of the neighborhood by denying the mass and the footprint of the proposal, and not to let the topic of a sixth floor distract from the other factors that cause the mass to be a problem with this whole proposal. Thank you very much.
James, that ends our public comment other than the letters you have to read.
Okay, Linda, thank you. Some are letters and some are emails. I begin with a note from William Westberg. I strongly object to the addition of the sixth floor as proposed by the developer. This is a huge change from what the developer first presented. It will cut off light and circulation to our building, add significant population density, and have an overpowering presence, and likely be even taller than the MUSC dental faculty building, our neighbor. Moreover, it is not in keeping with Charleston skyline, which being compromised with the addition of oversized buildings. Our historic city is beginning to look more and more like every other mundane urban place. Also, the proposed building crowds our building, leaving little space between the proposed and our building. I have reservations regarding the close proximity of 40 B Street, vis-a-vis fire department and EMS ease of access. I urge you to disapprove the addition of a sixth floor and not to approve the close proximity to 40 B Street flats. Second, to members of the BAR, thank you for the opportunity to express my opinion on the project at 102 President Street. I've been a resident of 40B flats since 2007. As an owner, I have seen much progress in the neighborhood. At one point, I sent an email to the president of MUSC thanking him for the wonderful job. The urban farm, the dental school, and all wonderful landscaping throughout the campus. I love my neighborhood. It is exciting to think that the lot at 102 President will be developed. The plans are beautiful and quite massive. I do have some concerns. How will an emergency vehicle fire truck be able to get to the 40 B Street Flats 4-story building? It is the building that the project will be in front of. I just watched the amazing fire department respond to the fire at MUSC. They have their hands full. Do they have a say in this approval? It seems the proposed driveway for the project will enter and exit President Street. Prior to COVID-19, there was a gridlock with cars getting into the parking garage across the street, mornings and evenings. It's a garage for healthcare workers. President is also the route for ambulances coming in from the Charlestown. I'm concerned more traffic feeding into this part of the President will be dangerous. I was fortunate to be able to attend the planning board meeting virtually. The request from the project to change to a 5-story use was granted. I now see that the plans are for a 6-story. I am confused. Is this common when only a 5-story building was granted? Please remember this is a neighborhood. I feel that extra height will have an enormous negative impact. Thank you for your time. And that's signed Sharon Delaney, 40 B Street, Unit 407. Zach Bradley. To whom it may concern, the design plans for the proposed student housing building to be built at 102 President Street need to be harshly revised. From what I understand, the building was originally supposed to be 5 floors and has since been changed to 6. This additional floor comes without any additional architectural character or integrity to blend in with the historic architecture of the Cannonboro, Elliottboro neighborhood. No charm at all. In short, this building is the entrance of our neighborhood, and it feels more like a wall blocking our neighborhood. Cannonboro, Elliottboro has an abundance of locally owned shops and restaurants and is very inviting to the public. Please urge the architects to redesign this building to be an extension of our charming neighborhood and instead of blocking it off. This is from Kelly Rainwater, who I guess is a owner, does not live there. It is my understanding this project has already been approved for 5 floors. Now the owner is seeking a 6th floor. Since this is a residential building adjacent to other residential structures, it will tower over the surrounding homes and apartments and does not seem in keeping with the scale of surrounding residential structures. I respectfully request this building not exceed 5 floors for this reason. I own the condominium at 40 B Street Flats. Next is from Aaron Pabst from Canyon Oaks Drive. As an owner at 40 B Street, we strongly urge you not to allow a building of such height, but rather something comparable to our current building, which has stood for many decades. It could be detrimental to our ownership in this property. Thank you for your time and consideration, Aaron and Sean. Next is from Susan Lyons, who lives on Gadsden Street. This proposal for mixed-use student housing on the corner of President and Cannon Streets is entirely out of character with the adjoining residential modest neighborhood. It is upsetting to see an application for such an oversized building on the Charleston Peninsula, particularly on the frequently flooded, highly congested west side. It seems a greater insult to our skyline for the developer to seek even further height, amassing a size and scale more benefiting Chicago than Charleston. It is time to apply common sense limits on what we are building here. Please deny this application. Next is from Cindy Wofford, who lives on Elliott Street. Please do not allow the 6th floor addition to this project. That change jeopardizes the passionate scale of the entire adjacent neighborhood. The skyline of the peninsula needs to be respected. This proposed change does not accomplish that goal. Many thanks. Next is from Ed and Carolyn Holshner, 65 Anson Street. We are opposed to the size of the proposed project because it's too large. It will also impact traffic on Calhoun, which is already really congested. The next is from Lou Fisher from Salisbury, North Carolina. I'm an owner of multiple units in the adjacent property, 40 B Street. I spoke against the earlier rezoning of the proposed project from 4 stories to 5 stories for reasons outlined in my statement 9/15/20. I'm disappointed and against the developer's efforts to now ask for an additional story, increasing the total to 6 stories. However, I do appreciate the developer's efforts with our ownership group to minimize the impact on our residents by using a step-back design in the wall adjacent to our building. By being sensitive to the building and landscaping design of the elevation visible from our main entrance on B Street, and by incorporating common green space in the design of the Cannon Street elevation. Thank you. Next is Lynn Hanlon from Meeting Street. The southeast corner of Cannon and President is a prominent gateway to the Cannon Borough, Elliott Borough. The project should be compatible with and enhance the neighborhood. Please vote to deny the project as requested. It would overwhelm this important and well-established neighborhood. It looks like West Edge and is not appropriate to this location. Another is Amanda Griffith from Bull Street. Behold, God, Army, this is a very large project on a prominent corner coming onto the peninsula with no ground level, open space, and an almost full built out site. The proposed 6th floor must be a red herring, diverting our attention from the enormity of the mass of the structure. The bulk of the building is not mitigated by breaking it up into 4 modules with a swimming pool in between. Parking garage across the street looms over the sidewalk where no pedestrian can ever feel safe, but yet the 6th floor of the proposed structure is even higher and supposedly helps this lack of relationship between the user and the street experience. The merited 6th floor should be granted by a trade-off of open space and area design, bequeathing a gift to the citizens of Charleston. Too big, too tall, too much. Next is from James Lindley. Thank you for the consideration of public comment for this important topic. I am a homeowner of multiple condos at 40 B Street Flats and have been part of the community since the building's construction in '84. I have seen the neighborhood develop in many ways, but it has still managed to maintain its identity in a rapidly changing city. While I'm very encouraged by the degree to which the architects of the 102 President project have sought the opinions of our regime, I would like to express my concern over the size of the building. While the developers have a clear goal in mind, and while they have made a number of applauded changes to be good neighbors to 40 B Street flats, their proposal remains a very large project that would overwhelm the neighborhood. The large parking garage at the same intersection, coupled with this massive development, would make a looming corridor that does not serve as an appropriate gateway to Cannonboro, Elliottboro. The addition of a 6th floor only adds to that problem. I am in favor of the developer building something appropriate to the surroundings, and I believe they have great intentions with commercial space on the bottom floor. However, I ask that the city not sacrifice our neighborhood's identity by bringing such a tall and large-scale development to our front door. That's from James Lindley. Tara Hopp from Warren Street. Oh my, I've just seen the picture of the proposed building on the corner of Cannon and President, and I am almost at a loss for words. It looks massive and overpowering in the picture and will look even more so in reality. I cannot believe that the developer asked for an additional story and then turned around and asked for another. This developer is definitely not taking the surrounding area into account. I drive by this corner every day and have been looking forward to seeing this property updated basically since the late 1980s. However, this proposal is a disappointment to say the least. Please, please do not approve this project as it stands. The building is not inviting in the least and will loom over the area. Thank you for your time. William Amorosa from Rivers Cotton Road. 5 floors are high enough. Kashev Chandran from B Street. This project has the potential to reduce the value of buildings in the surrounding area and ruin a good view of the Charleston landscape. I, as well as other occupants and workers of the area, am opposed to moving forward with this project. Deanne Lucas from Hadrill Street. I am against the addition of yet another floor for this project. The building is too massive as is and will set a precedent for the entire block. I think a smaller, more residential looking project is more appropriate for this area. If you look from a bird's eye view from MUSC Dental Building onto the rooftops of the block, there are numerous trees for this block and the neighboring residential non-MUSC blocks. Please consider holding this building height to the already approved height. I own a unit at 40 B Street and an employee at MUSC. This is from Ann Igo from Church Street. I have lived on the peninsula for 80 years. Please do not build the complex at the corner of President and Cannon Street. We are already crowded. Catherine Corona from New Street. Please, please do not approve the mixed-use student housing building at Cannon and President Street. It is too tall, does not match the aesthetics of the neighborhood, and completely detracts from architecture and style of downtown Charleston. I understand the need for more student housing, but there are several other new builds already addressing this issue. This one is smack in the middle of the crosstown and is an eyesore. Brenda Drake from Wentworth Street. The proposed building is unattractive and not in keeping with the architectural style of the peninsula. Adding an additional story will only make matters worse. Please ask for a new set of plans more in keeping with Charleston style. Patrick Hill from Headquarters Plantation. I would like to go on record voicing my objection to this project. As an owner of 40 B Street Flats, I strongly disagree with the way this project is unfolding. Its scope and scale is much bigger than our building. It will completely block any views as well as sunlight to the adjacent structures. Let's not forget about the financial toil that will negatively impact our owners. Once again, mark me as vigorously opposed to this project. Thank you for your time and consideration. Tom Fisher from Montague Street. A similar sized development was denied BAR approval 4 years ago. It was too big then and it's certainly too big now that the peninsula has seen more untempered and irresponsible development. There is nothing wrong with change or growth, but it must be done responsibly and sensitively. Simply put, bigger isn't always better. The property owner has the right to do with his property what he wishes, but he does not have the right to ignore laws, zoning, or code, and he does not have the right to adulterate a neighborhood with unwanted and insensitive development. Let's have some standards. Let's do what is best for our city and community. Let's slow down and take a closer look at these proposals before accepting any and every plan to throw up a building. Okay, that's it.
Okay.
So, Kara, would you like some time to respond to either the public comment?
Sure.
Well, wait a minute. I beg your pardon. I have jumped over the staff's comment. Sorry, Laura.
No.
That is quite all right, James. Thank you for reading all those. Okay. Staff comments are applicant is in the process of having property rezoned from an allowable 4 to 5 story height and is further requesting an additional story for architectural merit and context, which must be approved by the board. The massing has been well modulated at the rear with the step backs to allow for more air and light into the nicely developed pocket park area between the building and the B Street apartments to the east. Massing along President Street has been well broken up into vertical elements to the east and west, separated by an court at the second floor level. Staff recommends the facade study 1 shown on sheet 25 for all of the tower front corners on President Street as it helps to establish a rhythm across the overall President Street facade and reinforces the 103 pattern of the stacked windows. There needs to be a clearly defined strong cornice at the second floor with columns as wide as practical and spaced equally along the entire President Street facade base to reinforce the true colonnade present at the northeast corner. The tower cornice needs to be more articulated, and the roof overhang at the recessed top 6th floor should be minimized. Any visible rooftop MEP will need to be screened. With that, our recommendation is for conceptual approval with staff and board comments noted, with approval for an extra story based on architectural merit and context.
Great, thank you, Lawrence. Kara, would you like to respond to either staff or public comment?
I would like to, I guess I need to keep it short. I think I have only 3 minutes or something like that. First, I'd like to thank everybody for the comments, and I appreciate staff's comments and all the comments from the groups that we have met with. I appreciate the comments on the architecture from the Cannonboro neighborhood, which we have met to address concerns from the neighborhood. We have also met with the B Street Flats group right adjacent to our site, and that group I suppose, consists of 84 condo owners on that site. So we have tried to reach out to them, and we met with the regime group. But there are obviously a lot of different opinions, and all of the feedback that we heard tonight, it's not the same feedback. It's very different, so that you cannot really please everybody. But what we have tried to show you here is that we have a site that can support density. We are not in a 1- and 2-story neighborhood. We are on Cannon Street at the end of a row of parking garages, and hopefully the site can be developed as a mixed-use building with student housing instead of putting another parking garage there. We do have a 4-story building, the B Street Flats building, on the other side of our property, but this building, if it would be built right now, it wouldn't be approvable with their floor-to-floor heights by the BAR standards. And so we have tried to rezone, or we have rezoned this site for a 5-story height district. We couldn't go for a 6-story height district because you can only increase the current zoning district by 1 story. Otherwise, we would have gone for 6th floor. So we didn't try to hide anything. And again, this is a project that can be developed if the density is allowed here. It would contribute to the public and address the architectural merit character with our improvements to the streetscape, with our colonnade, the elevated seating area, the accessible retail space that we are providing for this area that currently doesn't have these retail areas, and the pocket park and the shared green space that we are proposing to be used for both the B Street Flats and our property. So these are concessions and offerings that we are giving here that I'm surprised that they are not as appreciated. So, and in terms of the shared green space that we have described, that was described as a tunnel and a cave by some of the commentators, but we are actually providing at the widest site a 30-foot wide courtyard, 38-foot wide courtyard at the widest section. As the building goes up, we're having a 5-foot step back on the 2nd floor, and then an additional 10-foot step back on the 5th and the 6th floor. So the 5th and the 6th floor from the B Street Flats building is not really perceivable. And in response maybe to the Preservation Society that want to see a more residential approach on this site, if we are proposing a 2-story or 3-story building here, that will be towered over by the adjacent parking garage. We do have wide streets here. We have to the north of our side the pump station that creates an additional 120 foot between our building and the adjacent residential neighborhood. So this site can breathe, and we think it can support this height. And this additional 6th floor will allow us to create this common green space, to step our building back from the B Street Flats group, and to use high quality materials and make these streetscape improvements to the site. So, to finish off, this is not King Street in downtown Charleston. This is a completely different area. This property is a gateway towards the medical district and a gateway towards Cannonboro neighborhood. So I think you need to look at the site for what it is and not mistake it for a King Street property. And I'll just finish off with, again, thanking everybody for the comments. And of course, we will continue to develop the various things that were discussed. And we would like to request the conceptual approval tonight.
Thank you, Carol. Board discussion.
It's a tough one. I guess I will start.
Yep.
Luda Sobchuk. Okay. It's kind of now two of me here. So the building by itself, the architecture, let's start with the building location. It's sort of on a pivotal point on the corner, which connects the MUSC developments and what is coming from the bridge, all this new hotels which are coming and everything what is already built. And then going east, there's really residential 35 feet max structures, individual residential structures. So which one to lean forward with this corner? Architecturally, it's nicely detailed, solid urban design, which may belong on a upper peninsula, but it's hard to digest it to have it here. It seems like fairly massive. I understand about adding 6th floor for architectural merits, meaning better materials, green space, but it doesn't do much for the building itself, for its massing. Actually, the 5th floor could be lighter looking and things like that. There's some comments from staff, like the colonnade along the President Street and turning on the Cannon Street. It seems to be needs to be more. It needs to be rhythmic and consistent, in my view. And there also Andrew was mentioning about those columns are really saying to what they are supporting above visually. Yes, but there's also nice detailing, traditional corbels and things like that with the modern approach to overall design. So I'm turned here. The corner is also, is it glass or is it just, simply a repeated bay of the vertical windows on either side? And corner probably needs to be addressed, as Kara said, and kind of balance what is happening in other corners. And we know that there will be some more developments on other sides, and some of the buildings probably will go away, and there is open parking space, and on the west side, I guess it's on the north side. But for the moment, I'm not sure I can support the 6th story. And I think the building 5-story probably will work here. But we need to look at it a little bit more softer approach to, because it's a residential building and it's not, really urban residential. It's more of the low country residential area. So I'm not sure for the moment if I can support this application right now.
Leon?
Okay, this is Leon. I'm somewhat in agreement that it's the location of that building, and the what the residents say. A great deal of them have said that the interference, feeling cave-like, or being blocked in. And again, I've heard the comments that may change in the future. You may have other dwellings that look a little different, taller, and so forth. But as it exists right now, it's really difficult in good conscience to to say, okay, let's move forward when it obviously has such a negative impact on so many people, particularly the sixth floor, which has continued to raise question, even those who are supportive of the idea of the project. So I can't, in good faith and in good conscience, give approval until we take a further look and perhaps reconsidering that sixth floor and maybe the mass of the building itself.
Thank you, Leon. This is a transition piece of property between Elliott Borough, Cannon Borough, and MUSC. I believe that this piece of property can support a height that this project demonstrates. But I'm not sure it supports that height with this application. I believe that this project contributes to the public need, but it's a portion of the public need and it needs to contribute to the total public need. I'm not sure about the sixth floor for architectural merit with this application, but I think some modifications to this could yield a position where I would feel comfortable with the sixth floor for architectural merit. I'm not right now. I appreciate the colonnade. I like the colonnade. I feel the bottom needs to be more bold. I do feel like it is top heavy. But the most challenging thing for me is that this is a transition piece of property, and that challenge is why this property has stayed void for so long. So I appreciate the effort that's gone into making this effort. And it seems to me that this could be a great first step. And with all of the comments and discussion that's been had, it may be a good time to defer this application. And that's just what my thoughts are. Yeah, Luda, were you going to say something else?
No, I just in support of the fact that it is transitional. That's what I was saying. It's sort of pivot, which way you go toward the more urban MUSC and or toward more low country residential. And so we're kind of stuck, but yes, that corner can support the height. It's just messing of it is a different issue too, also. So again, I guess I'm with you, with both of you. I cannot support this application at this time.
Can I have a point of clarification, please?
Yes.
Whatever motion is being put on the table, I would hope that we can get a little bit of direction, because city staff is saying one thing, and we obviously continue to work with city staff and the board thinking about potentially a sixth floor deferral or not. But it would help us a lot if you give us a little bit more information on the basis of the deferral, potentially if it's architectural direction, height, sixth floor, something like that.
So, Kara, maybe I should, at least for me, no. I think each board member has made their comments, and we are looking at this over the last week since we've gotten it, and so I think we've made our comments, and those are the comments that that you are getting. Now, if any of my Luda or I guess if Leon, you want to say something different than that? Absolutely, please do. But from my perspective, I've said what my comments were.
I did as well. I don't have any further comments.
And thank you.
So is there a motion?
Okay, this is Leon. I'd like to make a motion for a deferral of the, a deferral pending, pending further, should I say demonstration of architectural merit to be presented to the board and staff? Does that work as a motion? In other
Well,
words,
I mean, any motion you make is a fine motion. I need to get you to say it again, and I guess you're thinking the most inclusive thing would be the board comments that were made.
okay. Okay, so a deferral, a deferral of approval pending additional architectural merit of the 6th floor pending board comments.
All right, let me read this back to you. Deferral of approval or deferral of the application with board comments and further architectural study of the 6th floor.
Yes.
Okay. Is there a second?
I just wonder if it's enough. And I know we had a lot of comments and maybe kind of plus and minus comments. So is it clear enough for the applicant? No.
Well, Luna, perhaps maybe you should make the motion.
So
again,
Leon, if you want to withdraw your,
I would like to
your motion.
withdraw mine.
Okay, Luda. Thank you, Leon.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm going to try, but bear with me.
Well,
So
perhaps
I'm sorry.
Could help to clarify this a little bit more. At conceptual, what you're primarily concerned with is the height, scale, and mass, and general architectural direction. Now, on top of those things, they are additionally requesting an additional floor. So if you pare it all down into a nutshell, that's basically what you're dealing with here.
Right.
That help?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Good.
So I'm going to try. So deferral with the height, scale, and mass.
Okay.
of the of the architectural merits to this presented structure and additional sixth floor. I don't know if I'm doing this right.
Luda, there's no right or wrong. You say it.
Yep.
That's right.
What I'm saying is clear enough again, because what is missing, and missing non-residential missing right now, that's what we're looking at. So should I add that?
I believe, Luda, that you cover everything if you say height, scale, and mass.
Okay.
I agree.
But it's your motion, and I felt that you were asking that as a question, so I was answering it.
Right. So deferral of the height, scale, and mass, and merits of the sixth floor. Let's see, including all board comments and staff comments of the D and C.
D and C, is that what you said?
Yeah, C and D. I'm sorry. C, D, and E.
Okay, so deferral of height, scale, and mass and architectural merits of additional sixth floor, including all board comments and staff comments, C, D, and E. Is that correct, Luda?
Yes.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
This is Leon. I will second.
Leon has seconded that motion. Is there any further discussion? No, I want to ask y'all for just a minute. I want to just read something real quick. So Luda and Leon?
Yes.
I mean, just as part of discussion, and this is just discussion, you know, if we look at C, let's see. No, okay, I don't have any more thoughts on it. So with that in mind, Ms. Subche, how do you vote?
Yay in favor of deferral.
Yay in favor of deferral. Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yay in favor of deferral.
And this is James Metters. I vote in favor of deferral. It's a unanimous vote in favor of deferral. Thank you. Thank you, Leon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Caro, Luda, Leon,
Thank you.
Lawrence,
Thank you.
Linda, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Very much, James.
Thank you, Lawrence. All right, bye.
Thank you.
Bye.